Institute and its leader, Melanie Campbell, who has been an incredible champion of 1 Million Black Women. As a member of our advisory council, Melanie has helped to guide our work for the last 2 years, and we're so proud to partner with her, the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and Black Women's Roundtable. Today, in particular, I'm excited to talk about our newly formed partnership with Black Women's Roundtable on digital connectivity. As everyone has mentioned, this is a very important issue, and it's also a key focus for us, for 1 Million Black Women, since Georgia, Mississippi, Virginia, to champion for newly appropriated funding for broadband expansion and to ensure that it is equitably deployed across underserved communities. So our goal together is to have Black women enjoy equitable and sustained access to economic growth and security through digital connectivity opportunities in healthcare, education, entrepreneurship, and employment. We will also be tracking these outcomes and conducting research as we carry out this work with BWR, so that's very exciting. This project will provide tangible and impactful research and engagement opportunities for graduate and undergraduate students at HBCUs, as well as for community organizers across those 5 states through doctoral fellowships, graduate assistantships, undergraduate internships, and community leader fellowships. Also, last but not least, in addition to our partnership with Black Women's Roundtable, 1 Million Black Women looks forward to partnering with the U.S. Department of Commerce on our first digital connectivity listening session in a few weeks on June 21st. This will be a public session used to gather feedback in connection with federal Digital Equity Act programs. We look forward to having Melanie's participation in that listening session as a panelist and expert, and encourage everyone to attend and provide your feedback. So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kristen. Can we give Kristen and Kimma a thank you? One of our longtime friends who's in the media space, but in this moment, even though Tommy was an Omega, he's an Alpha. Dr. French is an Alpha, right? Or am I messing up? He's an Alpha, right? So he get Alpha privileges today. Wanted to bring a few words, and then we'll bring on our team. We said we're open for business, so I want to introduce you to the team. Roland Martin, Unfiltered, and so much more. Thank you, Roland, for all you do, speaking truth to power and providing a platform. I remember when, to talk about utilizing and seeing a vision, he had a vision, and people didn't quite get it, but we got it early, and want you to bring some words, Roland.
So glad to see everyone here. Tommy and I used to joke because he did choose a youth group, being Omega. I would always tell him, Alpha's your daddy. You always know that. And if he was here, he'd be cracking up laughing at that as well. This is critically important because what this speaks to is the need for us to mobilize and organize in a totally, completely different way, and really actually going back to the future, if you will. I was standing here thinking about Dr. King's book, Why We Can't Wait, and we've been having these conversations about how we cannot wait until next year, can't wait until the fall of 2024, because if you look at what's happening all across southern states, the impact on African Americans with public policy is grave. Whether you're talking about the health of Black women in Mississippi, whether you're talking about voting in Florida, my native Texas, the craziness that's happening there. And what we have is we have people who are already there. We have numbers, but they simply have not been properly activated, motivated, and also educated. We spend lots of time telling people to vote, but I can't vote unless you're registered, and I can't get you to register unless I educate you on why you need to be voting. And so one of the things that we do with Roland Martin Unfiltered and the Black Star Network is connect the dots. And so by aligning ourselves with activists and organizations like the National Coalition and Black Women's Roundtable and so many others, it's about using the media's voice to be able to sort of drive the messaging because so many people literally don't understand what is happening. So when somebody says that, well, picking a Black woman to the Supreme Court is performative politics, not understanding the role that one federal judge, the power that they have. So when one judge in Amarillo issues a ruling that stops the abortion pill all across the country, you understand the power of that one federal judge. And so we spend a lot of time doing that. And so we're going to need to do that in a huge way between now and 2024, because the laws that are being passed every single day have an adverse impact. I'm born and raised in Houston, and when you have a legislature in Texas that literally passes a law to target one county out of 254, which has the most black people in the state, that tells you right there, again, what is happening. So, so this is absolutely needed, and I think in terms of how we grow from here is going to be important, but it's just going to come down to, again, us mobilize and organize our people and getting them to understand is that we cannot be silent and then think it's somebody else is going to do it. No, this is something that we actually have to do for ourselves every single day.
Thank you, Roland. And so, and now we introduce, so who's going to be doing this work, right? So Carol, Carol, you know, was doing 2.5 years coming back and forth, and you know, you're out looking and you're looking and you're looking, and then you look across the table and say, you need to do this. You've been doing this. So it is my really honor and pleasure to introduce to you all our founding director of the Institute, Getchell L. Caldwell II. He's a former senior vice president for institutional advancement and university relationships here at Clark Atlanta University. He was vice chancellor for advancement and executive director for Fayetteville State University Foundation. He's helped folks with fundraising and grant writing and all that. He was vice president for advancement at Tuskegee University. Have I missed anything? He's Johnson C. Smith. He's a graduate of Clark Atlanta University class of '79, and undergrad from Florida, FAMU, Cleola Brown, political science major. And more importantly, he's just a good brother who believes in utilizing all of his talents and gifts that God has given him. So I'm gonna have him come up and introduce the senior advisors who will make remarks. And also, I wanna take a moment, and I didn't do this earlier. I think it's important. This is also our Southern Regional Office. So, Alabama, is Sheila Tyson here? Okay, Sheila Tyson, give her a hand. Letitia Daniels Jackson, those are our conveners in Alabama. In Florida, we have Solange Benton, who's here from Florida Coalition on Black Civic Participation. Louisiana, we have my brother Vincent Sylvain, who runs our affiliate there, Louisiana Unity Coalition. Georgia's deep. Georgia, I don't think Helen's here, but Georgia, Helen Butler, executive director. Oh, she is, Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda. Deborah Scott, who's our partner with Georgia Stand Up. Felicia Davis, who does our Clayton County, Georgia Black Women's Roundtable, also leads HBCU Green Fund. Who I missed? Mississippi, Cassandra Welchland, if she's in the house. In Virginia, and Krista Jones, who's here from Virginia. And I'm gonna say they Southern anyway, and that's our folks who lead our Maryland, DC country, y'all too. Just say what you want to. Everybody come from up south, and you be in North Carolina all the time. Reverend Tony Lee, who's here, who also serves on the board of the National Coalition and helps lead our work in Virginia, in Maryland and DC. Have I missed any Southern states? Okay. And, oh, don't forget labor. I'm gonna get in trouble, right? So one of our the national coalitions was started by AFL-CIO, NACP, Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, and the 35 organizations. So all of our organizations that are here, that are new or old and part of that institution building, wave your hands if you're in here. I see NBCSL. Who else do I see? I see APRI. Was asked me. Who else in here? Labor. Oh, I see your cap. CBTU. Have I missed any other? And then, of course, yeah, I said NBCSL, but National Black Caucus of State Legislators. So glad you all are here. See Paulo right there. have I listed any other organizations who are part of the National Coalition? So I will turn this over now to Getchell, how was I going to say, Vincent? I said Vincent, Getchell Caldwell II. He didn't make sure put the second on his name, right? Okay, and you will introduce.
Yes. Thank you so much, Melanie. This is really a profound opportunity. I'm returning to Clark Atlanta University. Is Dr. French still in the house? Well, but I wanted to make sure, Lucas, that the invitation by Melanie Campbell, Dr. French, and sanctioned by Mr. Dorch, that I take on this assignment is probably one of the greatest honor of my life, Carol. I've been at many institutions, done many things, all senior level positions. But it's amazing when God kind of have you look at yourself in the mirror, and then in one ear you got Melanie over here. And you know, Melanie got a strong voice, and she believes what she believes, trust me. The other ear was timing, and then you had Dr. French. So all good leaders got to have a sidekick, so I'm the sidekick, okay? I get to do the heavy lifting along with obviously a group of dedicated people, all of whom are associated with the National Coalition on Black Civic Engagement. This assignment is so dear to me because deep down inside, I'm an academic and I'm a researcher. When I was a graduate student here at Atlanta University from 77 to 79, we were required in the public administration program to tackle on a problem with a public agency. I had the wonderful opportunity to be assigned to the mayor's office, and he then assigned me to the Department of Public Safety. My graduate thesis reorganized the Department of Public Safety, and it is on file up in the Woodruff Library. So this returns me to my academic career, if you will. But it also balances me with what needs to be my God-driven commitment, and that is helping people that look like me, because people help me. So I didn't just get to this place without the help of others, and I'm standing on a lot of shoulders. In fact, I will say this very respectfully. It has been intimated that Tommy's looking down. I want to correct that. Tommy's in the room. That's right. And I remember a wonderful conversation he and I had right there at that counter prior to him leaving us. And we had an activation that the National Coalition put on with a lot of young people. They were monitoring voting patterns in southern cities. And I had never seen anything like it because here it is, these little black kids were on the phone with state leaders. They were getting feedback about what was happening. Melanie had it all organized. They were feeding it to a system, and we were learning the true pulse of what was happening in our communities and at our polls. How real can you get in terms of working on the ground? But that was done through coalition building, and that's a strong suit of the National Coalition on Black Civic Engagement. The other part that is so exciting about this assignment is that I am anchored by and with three extraordinary academicians of their own right. And so for that, I'm going to introduce each of them to come up and give a little blurb about who they are. First up, and this is all about Clark Atlanta, I'm sorry. Because you go get people where you know somebody, okay? We had a planning retreat up in Martha's Vineyard, and actually Dr. Tommy was on the phone, Dr. French was on the phone, and then Melanie assembled a group of her team and advisors together. So when we thought about an institute and what it would mean, we gave a lot of thought into this, and that's how we came up with the 4 pillars. So today I am pleased to bring forward first Dr. Elsie Scott. She's a 1980 graduate of Atlanta University, and she's going to lead us off. And then I'll come back and close it out for the programmatic part. Dr. Elsie Scott.
Yes. Thank you, Getchell. I'm tempted to say, like Nina Simone, enough said. Because I know those of you who've been standing in the back and in all the heat are saying, enough said. But they're not going to allow me to just walk up here and walk away. So I'll say a few words. I serve as secretary of the board, and I'm very pleased to be a part, as a senior advisor to this project here at Clark Atlanta University. As Getchell mentioned, I received my PhD from the old Atlanta University in 1980. And you look back at the history of Atlanta University before it was merged with Clark, so many people that you will meet receive their masters, so many black people receive their masters or their PhDs from the programs here at Clark Atlanta University. So I'm very pleased to be able to come back and help to develop the fellowship program here. And we are excited because it's not traditional fellowship program where we're just training our students to do research. We also have them engaged in their communities, looking at how do we bring in organizers to train them on how to be political organizers. We're also looking at the whole, how do we deal with this whole social justice issue? And that's how I got into social justice here at Atlanta University. I wrote my doctoral dissertation looking at Maynard Jackson and how he had dealt with the police here after becoming mayor of Atlanta. So, you know, we bring a lot of circles together through this institute. And I was fortunate to study under Dr. Mac Jones. Many of you don't know that there are only two HBCUs that offer PhDs in political science. That's Howard University, where I work now, and Clark Atlanta University. And so we're developing at Howard the Ron Walters Center on Leadership and Public Policy. So we hope to be doing a lot of things together between the two institutions. But the program here is going to be more expansive because we'll be dealing with more than being a think tank, more than just doing a lot of academic research. So I want to thank Melanie for this opportunity. I want to thank Dr. French for his engagement. And I want to thank the Clark Atlanta University family for embracing this project here on the campus. And we look forward to working with the whole Clark Atlanta University family. And we want to thank all of the sponsors who've made this financially possible. We're looking forward to doing great things. Thank you.
Next up, we have a vivacious young lady by the name of D.C. Marshall. She is CEO of Diverse and Engaged, and an award-winning business owner, author, contributor to CNBC, Forbes, Fortune magazine, senior advisor to the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, and she's a recipient of an award from the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. And Dr. French was at her ceremony when she got that award. She is a senior advisor extraordinaire, D. Marshall.
Well, thank you. And actually, I'll start here. I'll pick up the award. Thank you so much to the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. It was an award of the coalition. Thank you, Melanie Campbell. The board, and I'll say this without getting emotional, it was actually the spirit of democracy. It was a chairman's award. And the award was given by the late Thomas W. Dortch Jr. And it was such an honor in his final months that Melanie Campbell and this organization would honor him. And so, and that is the reason that we are here today. So not a somber moment, but it is a moment of celebrating that we are here and his legacy lives on. This is a powerful day. And so we just honor, and we are so very grateful to you, Melanie, for carrying the vision. And some of this that I know you all intended to do side by side, and so we're so honored to be here, and we thank you for Mrs. Dortch for also for being here. So my name is D.C. Marshall. I'm the CEO at Diverse and Engage, where we speak 3 languages: leadership development, workplace culture, and diversity and inclusion. And we do the work with Fortune 500 corporations to really support corporations, but also to hold space, hold space, for Black and brown and underrepresented and marginalized groups in corporate America. Say yes or yes, somebody. And that is why this is also so very powerful to be here today, because while we do that work in corporate America, we also hold a very sweet space to really support the work that is being done here at the coalition. And so today, say today, today on this historical day at the launch and the official inauguration of what is going to happen after, that is the convening, you know, I am so very delighted to be here. And so, in brief, I'll share what my role is as a senior advisor for economic empowerment. And so, again, just to reiterate, what is happening here is the launch, not only of the Institute, but the programming. And so what are we doing here at the Institute? So we have several pillars that we are going to champion here at the Thomas W. Dorch Institute on Clark Atlanta University campus. And one of those pillars, of which I have the pleasure of leading, is the economic empowerment pillar. And what does that mean? What are we doing here? What are we moving towards? Why are we here? Our role in this specific pillar is to really look at the financial wealth and well-being and progress for Black people. That's it. That's the charge. I'll say it again. What is my task as senior advisor specifically for this pillar, the economic empowerment? Because I can't do what Dr. Elsie Scott does. I can't do what Joycelyn does and all of the other amazing people, but I am an entrepreneur. I am a businesswoman, so I understand. And so I have been tasked to lead this, and we are going to look at the economic space in terms of where we are, how we are faring, and how it is that we help our people and help our people in the southern region, specifically in and around neighboring HBCUs. Say HBCU. Okay, sidebar, I did not go to an HBCU, but I feel I got my HBCU. You know, I'm claiming Clark Atlanta. Listen, I'm claiming CAU, but that is the work. So we'll look at not just Clark Atlanta, because the Southern Institute is specifically focused on the region, but looking at all of the HBCUs in the region and the neighboring communities to help our people, because that's where our people are. And what will we do? We will leverage the research. You all know that CAU is a research institution and social justice, and Melanie has been led to lead us in this way. So we look at the research. What are some of the social trends? Okay, so sidebar, I'm going to be one more minute. Right now, what is happening in Florida, and how will that impact Black and brown communities? How will it impact Black communities specifically? If you can't say diversity, and we know that there are specific opportunities to look after our people going to work and such, do you get it now? So we look at those trends, develop thought leadership. That is part of what is happening here. And then we will use that for experiential learning and specifically entrepreneurship. And so our goal is to collaborate with local community-based organizations and collegiate students, HBCUs, to deliver, say deliver, entrepreneurship training and support to help our people, so that we can build our own work, our own wealth. And so that is what I am tasked to do. I'm super excited. Again, I did not go to an HBCU, Rev. I did not. But I went to another historically Black institution. They call it the street. So I have street cred. Okay, we running a whole business. Okay, we run a whole business, employing real people, and we cut checks. Okay, and then we serve our community. So I'm delighted. Thank you so much to all of the sponsors. And until next time, my name is DC Marshall.
Before you walk away. And Tommy got with Dr. William Picard, who's one of our investors in the Institute. And the director was, they wanted to use that for the economic empowerment component. So I want to make sure I lift up Dr. William Picard. Is it junior? Junior. Dr. William Picard, Jr., who serves as on the trustee board here at Park, and he and Tommy were very close. And so I want to lift his name in this moment.
Awesome.
And lastly, we have Jocelyn Tate. They've been working with me on that. She's a leading voice on digital equity and inclusion. She is the co-founder of Make It for Change policy and advisor for the Black Women's Roundtable and the program manager for the Black Women's Roundtable Racial and Gender Digital Equity Connectivity and Women's Empowerment Project. My colleague, Ms. Tate.
Thank you, Getchell. And let me say, Getchell almost got it right. I'm Joycelyn Tate. And as he said, I am advisor and on tech policy, and I am also the co-founder of Make It for Change Innovation Hub, where we teach people in the community how to create social impact with technology. Today I'm really excited because I've been working with Melanie for over 10 years on tech policy and digital equity. So when this opportunity came to lead this program, I was super excited. So I'm just going to tell you really briefly what the pillars are and what the components are of this program. The National Coalition's Black Women's Roundtable Racial and Gender Digital Equity, Connectivity, and Women's Economic Empowerment Project. What it will do is champion, for one thing, the deployment of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment Act's $65 billion in federal funding that's going to be used to increase adoption and broadband across the country. What this program is going to do is we are going to make sure that that money is equitably invested in unserved and underserved communities that the Black Women's Roundtable serves. So there are 4 components of this program. I'm just going to briefly tell you what those components are. The digital equity components are, first, we have our state coordinating committees. These committees will engage with state broadband offices as they're planning out where this money will go, and we want to make sure that that federal money funding for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program and the Digital Equity Act is invested in the communities that the Black Women's Roundtable serves in the South, and we're particularly focusing on serving Black women. The second component of this program is our Digital Equity Connectivity Outreach and Awareness Campaign, which will inform and encourage eligible households, particularly Black women-headed eligible households, to sign up for the Affordable Connectivity Program and the Lifeline Program, which are 2 programs that are offered by the federal government to give them discounts on internet access in their home. The third component of the program is the Digital Equity and Connectivity Research, which will be conducted by the Institute's Hope and Justice Fellows, who will manage and research and focus on how federal broadband funding will impact digital equity and connectivity in the U.S., and particularly in the southern states. And this research will also assess the Black Women's Roundtable's engagement and outreach activities for this program. The fourth and final component of our program is the Digital Empowerment Training. This will provide women and girls with training on computer literacy skills that they need to effectively participate in the job market and the digital economy, and provide digital skills for Black women and girl entrepreneurs to effectively manage and promote their businesses. I am very excited to embark on this project, and I look forward to fulfilling this project's mission to see that federal funding is invested in our communities, the communities here in the South that the Black Women's Roundtable serves, and empowering Black girls and women to advance their lives in the digital economy, and also to chronicle these Black and American history-making events right here at this institute. Thank you so much.
Can we give our team a hand? And we will have a senior advisor for social justice and a senior advisor for civic engagement. This concludes our press conference to officially open the Institute. And now So thank you, Getchell, and thank you, team, and thank you, everyone. We'll open it up for press for any questions. Any questions from the media? You want, anybody? Okay. You good? You got quite a bit, right? We answered all your questions. But I would be remiss because I do this work and to lift up my two sisters who preceded. How I got to Clark was my older sister, Diane Forsh, class of 74, and Reverend Dr. Judith Moore, class of 75, who taught me how to be a rabble-rouser, Carol. Had me walk around with, Black Power and God when I was 10. So we are here, and I thank them for that. Thank you all for coming. And following this is our inaugural Southern convening, organizing convening, leadership convening, where we have over 100 leaders from state-based and national organizations who are here. We have about 40 partners who are bought into this idea of coming together annually across movements, across various movements, to take the time to strategize, organize, collaborate, and partner. And the power of coalition is something that can change this nation at a time when we're such under attack. And so thank you, and God bless you, and thank you so very much. And one more thank you.
Yeah, one thank you. I wanted to certainly thank everybody who worked on this project. We have an amazing team.
Where are you at?
I think a lot of our team are in the workroom.
Tanya Tyson, where are you? Tanya Tyson,
Where's Tanya?
come on up.
Where's Daryl?
Daryl Coles, Angelo Greco, Lon Walls, Tyrese Johnson.
They're all outside.
Okay.
And also,
And even though
Oh.
she's not on the staff, she's been wonderful.
Cecilia
Cheeks.
And my
Mustafa
entire
Hafiz.
formal staff, many of you took time. Many of you took time from your vacation schedules because you wanted to help out.
Yes.
That's what they do at Clark Atlanta. So all of those that I used to have a previous working relationship, thank you from the bottom of my heart, because we're going to do great work together. Thank you so much.
And okay, all the sponsors that are left, come up. But I want to we can pull this up. And so those watching, tune in again. If you're watching, come back and tune in at 4 o'clock when we start our inaugural Southern organizing leadership convening on the campus of Clark Atlanta University.
They want to do it outside.
You want to do it outside? Yes. Okay, so we're going to go outside for the sponsors. I want the board members and everyone to take a great shot. So we'll come outside. Thank you all so very much. We're open for business.
Right? And when they felt like giving up, they knew that God didn't bring them this far just to leave them, and that they had to do something for the next generation. And here we are today. We are getting beat down left and right, but let me tell you, the beat down that we're getting does not compare to what our ancestors had to go through. They don't even come close. They didn't have vote by mail back then. They didn't have online registration back then. And so even though we may face adversities, we can look back at our ancestors who didn't feel no way tired because they knew they had a charge. They knew that in spite of their differences, that they had to come together as one so they can make a way for people like us. So we got to do that. When we feeling weary, when we feeling disrespected, when we're feeling neglected and want to just walk away, we got to remember that he did not bring us this far just to leave us. And we have in our hands all the tools necessary. When I look at the people in this room, right here in this room is enough to revitalize, to re-energize the South. So we can overcome those differences. We can overcome those obstacles. In spite of what they throw at us, still we stand. In spite of what they threw at us in Georgia, we stood, we overcame. In spite of what they threw at us in Florida, we still stood, we overcame. Louisiana, North Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi. We got some strong shoulders that we standing on, and we got a powerful God that we serve. So don't ever allow the weight of this world to cause us to walk away, because he didn't bring us this far. He didn't bring us to Clark University. He didn't bring us to the ATL just to turn around and leave us.
Hey, how y'all feeling out there? Now, you know, I'm Baptist / AME, sometimes Bedside Baptist. And I have a big sister who's a retired pastor, and my pastor, I think, is in the room. And I forgot to do the inspiration. So, can you come on over here, sis? Who is also a graduate of Clark Atlanta University, class of 75, who will bring inspiration.
Nehemiah, one of Israel's great leaders, tells firsthand the powerful story of the rebuilding of the ancient Jerusalem, the wall after exile. This rebuilding, the face of great odds, represented the people's renewal of faith and their overcoming and diligence and resilience to complete the work. The people had a mind to work. True community engagement requires a fundamental shift that creates ways of working together. Each day, we are asking God to lay his hands on this intergenerational platform for leaders and allies, and that God will help us to rebuild hope, justice, equity, and equality. We lift up Thomas W. Deutsch Jr. Center and the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, Ms. Melanie Campbell, and Clark Atlanta University President, Dr. George T. French Jr., and all those who shared the vision. Maya Angelou said it this way: let nothing dim the light that shines from within. Let us pray. Oh, precious God and divine God, give us new strength that we can build places of belonging such as this. Help us to create a community for all to share their gifts, to know that each of us are loved, to help one another, and not to lose sight of the light to serve. Let us remember that each of us is necessary. May we balance mercy and justice so that we can achieve equality and access for all of our children. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Judith C. Moore. Cleola Brown. president of A. Philip Randolph Institute. Labor in the house. Is labor in the house? Yes. Cleola, give us your charge on why we come together and why we must work together in coalition.
Thank you, Sister Melanie. I'll stand, yeah, I can hide my cane, but can't hide anything else. How's everybody doing? We're in Atlanta, so I'll say, how you doing? How your mama doing? Okay, just making sure that we are on the same page. There's no need in being real proper and real dignified when you're with family. Be respectful of family. But you don't have to do anything beyond that. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Oh, keep on going. Because, you know, Melanie tells us all what to do and how to do it and when to do it. And we are obedient. Are we not, family? I wanted to say before I talked about the importance of coming together in coalition to Melanie that today was very, very emotional for a lot of us, because we heard this young sister talking about her thoughts and her dreams about what it would look like. And it's been a few years. But to watch that dedication, to watch inside of that building as it actually became a reality. Some of us who just cry anytime, I'm one of them, waterhead, had to pull up real tight because it was more than just being at an event. It was being present in a moment to be proud. You always make us proud. But today was amazing because your conversations with Tommy and with Ncbcp and with many of us sisters who, when we hurt, we find Melanie and others inside of that circle to find some comfort and some ease. But to watch you glow today was a real present. You did it, girl. You did it, girl. You did it. And we're really proud of you. Now, Mel asked me to talk a little bit about why it's important that we coalesce. We can talk about being brothers and sisters, but if you don't make it happen, then shame on you. I asked Mel to come to the AFL-CIO Executive Council meeting through the president because it was her place to invite Melanie to be there. Don't shortchange the structure. If others get an invitation from the president of the organization, let it come from the president of the organization rather than just from us. When she walked in that room, folks were like just looking around to see, you know, trying to figure out what she was gonna do. But Melanie walked in the room like she owned it, y'all. I wanna tell you that, okay? And by the time she left out of that room, she did own it, because the respect that they know that she has as an individual leader was very present in the presentation that she made. Coming from any of us, it would be expected and side-eyed a little bit. But I have been proud of you for a long time, and that moment was also one of them. But one of the best times was watching as Melanie pushed everybody to the top instead of herself when it came to talking about coalition. And she still does that. How many of you have ever been lifted by Melanie Campbell? See, that's what I'm talking about. Don't just talk about it, be about it. And every arm that brings about change needs to be touched and brought together, because sometimes we get in our own little kingdoms, don't want to share nothing with nobody, act like they're going to steal something from. Nobody can steal nothing that you don't give up. Come on. And a piece of it is having the kind of relationship that communications will come easy. No, this is a pretty young crowd, but how many of you remember Billie Holiday talking about strange fruit? Do you know what she was talking about in that song? What was she talking about? The lynching, that's right. But see, there were people who would not listen to her if she wasn't singing. You following me? So making sure that everyone in that arena that thought she was the cat's meow, and she was, so don't get it twisted. She made sure that she gave a message about us understanding how powerful it was to say that we could change that. And strange fruit has not gone away. The communications on it has become a little different, and it continues to evolve. There's one new, well, relatively new saying that comes through rap where they say, don't push me 'cause I'm close to the, I'm trying not to, ha ha ha, right? Okay? It's messaging and how we talk with one another and how we make things happen that makes it relevant to each other. And those kinds of things come from all of what we do. Tamika, when she gets going, you see both arms go up in the air. And the message starts. Don't get in the way because she'll knock you down. And you can go around this room and see the way that we build each other up instead of tearing each other down. We cannot forget that we owe it to each other to build the coalitions. And in the South, we will not be able to make a difference unless we do just that. That's why this piece is so vitally important. And by your being here, I know that is a pledge from each of you that that's what you will help to make happen. God bless you, and don't push me.
We say, don't push me, 'cause. All right, Cleola Brown, A. Philip Randolph Institute. So we are maneuvering this agenda, and so we have our. So what we're going to do is kind of combine it so we can stay on closer on course. So I'm going to ask Elsie Scott to come up, Brandon Cahey, Alicia Garza is here, Dr. Jones to come up. And Tamika's going to stay on this panel. Mary Pat is here, D. Marshall, and Charles Steele. And I don't know, I think we're going to do some, we're going to bring, and so we can have Cleola, Desmond, you guys could step down. Damon Hewitt, I'm sorry. I don't know if we have enough chairs. We want to, okay. So, okay. So we're going to move into, yeah, we need more chairs. Elsie, you going to stand here? Okay. Y'all all right? Repeat after me. Power of the ballot. Oh, goodness gracious. Power of the ballot. Power of the buck. The money. Power of the money. And power of the book. Power of the ballot, power of the buck, power of the book. That's our theme for this. One of my mentors, late Maynard Jackson, grandfather, coined that phrase, John Wesley Dobbs, power of the ballot, the buck, and the book as part of what it will take to liberate our community in this nation. And so we're going to go right into our first discussion, and that is going to be facilitated by Dr. Elsie Scott, and then it's a landscape analysis of Black America nationally and in the South, politically, economically, educationally, and socially. So, Elsie?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Elsie Scott. I'm the Secretary of the Board of Ncbcp, as well as I have a new role as a Senior Advisor on Leadership Development, Hope, and Justice Fellowship Program with the Institute. So we are a few minutes behind schedule, but we're going to try to roll it and let everybody have an equal part here. So I think we have enough mics so we can not use the time that you would use walking up here, just pass the mic and we can keep going. So our topic for the afternoon is a landscape analysis of Black America nationally and in the South, politically, economically, educationally, and socially. And so we have a very dynamic panel here, and we're going to try to give equal time as much as we can. And if we go into the power break, just say they took some minutes from us. So we took a few minutes from your power break. Okay, we have Brendan Kahi, or Kahi. How do I pronounce your last name? Kahi, okay. And he's a senior program policy analyst for African American outreach at NEA, the National Education Association. Give him a clap. We have Alicia Gaza, who's a principal with Black Futures Lab. Damon Hewitt, who's the president and executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under Law. Dr. Joseph Jones, who's the executive director of the W.E.B. Du Bois Southern Center for Studies in Public Policy here at Clark Atlanta University. Mary Pat Hector, who's the CEO of RISE. You've already met her, but we'll introduce her in the context of this panel. Tamika Mallory, co-founder of Until Freedom. Dee Marshall, who's the CEO of Diverse and Engaged, LLC. And last but definitely not least, we have Charles Steele, who's the president and CEO of SCLC. This is your panel. What we had originally planned to do was to have each one speak about the current state of Black America nationally. But we're going to reverse it a little bit. We're going to start off by asking Damon Hewitt, the president of the Lawyers Committee, to address this topic since his organization works nationally. And then we're going to talk more specifically about the South.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Right. I know we have to get to the business, but I cannot start without thanking Melanie Campbell and the National Coalition on Black Participation, Black Women Roundtable. Melanie, you're going to say not just the lady president, well, Melanie's all that. She's also been one of our favorite clients. I know we're respecting other clients in the room, but she allowed the lawyers to represent her in an important case that I don't have a chance to talk about. And we won that case. It's only one of the federal court cases we won that case against some New York Nazis. And you should applaud for Melanie because Melanie did this no small thing to stand up against today's attacks. Because today we have this really vicious mix of a virulent white supremacist ideology that is, sprouting up everywhere, or maybe we're just seeing it with fresh eyes, or America is seeing it with fresh eyes. You have that mixed with a callous and casual and systematized form of discrimination. Just as callous and casual is systematized as a police officer under color of law with the knee on the neck. That's the way racism is working against us today. And so I say that not to say woe is us, we'll be defeated, because we certainly have known rivers, we have seen a lot. But we have to act like we know. We have to fight what you would call, in mathematical terms, congruent battles, not asymmetrical battles, where you are bound to lose or try the same strategy. So we have to figure out new ways of being, new strategies. But in terms of understanding what we're facing, in the midst of that toxic but callous form of racism, I'm trying to think about what is the end game of some of these folks. And when I start to string together some of the cases that we're working on at the Lawyers Committee, some of what other colleagues and other organizations are working on, I try to sum it up, try to understand it as the end game is to erase us. These are erasure games. It's almost as if somebody's sitting back and doing this for sport. They're doing it in so many areas. So we argued the affirmative action cases in the U.S. Supreme Court. One of our lawyers was blessed to argue those cases. We're expecting a ruling by the Supreme Court in about a month, maybe even less than a month. That's an epic battle. But the logic of the other side in that case is, well, it's not so much what should be the merits of who gets into higher education. They're questioning whether we belong. They're saying we should use these very narrow metrics, these standardized test scores that we know systematically underpredict talent amongst black and brown students. So shouldn't that be the civil rights violation, not affirmative action? They're doing erasure games in other contexts. They're doing it for black farmers. We represented my man Dorian Spence, our VP for strategy, is in the back with other lawyers committee staff. Give it up for Dorian. Dorian led a team representing the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. You know, we own more land after Reconstruction than we do today as black people by acreage, right? And that continues to shrink as corporatized agriculture changes how we eat and what we eat, but it also squeezes out black farmers whom we know have been discriminated against, not just by other farmers, but by the USDA for decades. And we allege that the discrimination continues. When the federal government, when Congress passed a statute that would call for targeted debt relief for black farmers and other farmers of color, of course it was attacked in federal courts all across the board. Dorian led the team to intervene on their behalf, but the idea is that we don't want you to have a living, we don't want you to get this targeted money. Erase your games. Erase your games. And they're even doing it in voter rights in the big redistricting case out of Alabama that my colleagues at other organizations are arguing. Here's the theory of the case from the state of Alabama. Well, you know, if you want to create a second majority minority district because you have so many black folks, that's good and all, but to do that, you have to consider race, Helen Butler. In order to consider race, well, that's wrong because the Constitution says you shouldn't consider race. It shouldn't be the predominant factor. So basically, you can't enforce Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Good luck. Erase your games. They're trying to take away every avenue we have. So the threat that we're facing is not just the same battles of the past. There's a lot that's the same. But what's new to me is they're saying anytime you bring up race, whether it be in books that they're trying to ban or AP college curriculum or high school curriculum they're trying to ban, they're saying we shouldn't matter. We should be erased altogether. I think that's the end game. So what do we do in the face of that? I know I'm probably at my time. What do we do in the face of that? In the face of that, we have to be bold, blunt, loud, clear with each other, with ourselves, and certainly with the opposition. We can't play the same games. We can't settle for the same solutions. We need new and more creative. So I hope that we push each other and that y'all push us as well on that.
All right, thank you. Now I have to keep my instructions coming from Sister Mel. So what we want to do now is ask Sister Tamika Mallory, what is the greatest social justice challenges you see facing black communities in the South?
Thank you. Thank you all so much for having me here today. Thank you, Melanie, for inviting Until Freedom to be a part of this space. And I want to just acknowledge my colleagues, 2 of the other 4 co-founders of Until Freedom, Attorney Angelo Pinto and my son, Lennon. Thank you. Our dear sister, Linda Sarsour, was unable to be here with us today, but she made sure that we came because she loves Melanie and appreciates Melanie so much for always providing space for us. And I was thinking about my question in terms of what's the most, I guess, the most serious and pressing issue that we're dealing with in the South and across the country. And as I was talking to Angelo, just when we sat down here, we were talking about how some folks want to try to make a difference between the issues upstate, in the North, downstate, and in the South. And really, as Angelo said, the only difference is geographical. We are starting to see blurred lines where all over the country, all of the issues that each and every one of us is passionate about is happening everywhere. And so it's very difficult to say that in the South we're dealing more with one thing because gerrymandering and things like that are happening all over the country, including in New York State, which is supposed to be a liberal state that I live in. And I would argue today that we are certainly a conservative state, and our conservatism is capitalism. Our state is run by money. So whatever makes it, absolutely, whoever's clapping for that, you know what I'm talking about. It's what they say. There was plenty of folks with songs today, so our song in New York would be "Cash rules everything around me." Queen gets the money, dollar, dollar bill, y'all. And so we deal with that every day, fighting in our state against the issue of poverty and economic injustice. And I think that is a concern of people all across this country, that every other issue we suffer from and everything that we deal with, if you look at the root causes of gun violence, of police brutality, if you look at food deserts, all of those issues, poverty is at the center of how we got there. And, you know, therefore, you have so much happen. And even just today, as we travel, we talked about scamming that's happening and how our elderly people are being taken advantage of because people are trying to address the issue of poverty. People are trying to find a way to survive. And so I would say that it's not a Southern issue. I think it is an issue across this nation dealing with poverty and the type of circumstances created out of that for our community, and our community not being in one part of the country, but being all over the country. And I wanted to just go back and address the issue of how we build coalition to address that, understanding that each one of us will approach the issues from different perspectives. Some of us will be what is considered to be radical, others will be more traditional, if you will, which Melanie calls herself traditional, but if you were a part of our late night conversations, you would know she's more radical than me. Sometimes I have to say, Mel, hold on, especially when we have the great Cora Masters Berry on the phone, because she calls us and say, y'all ain't doing nothing, just turn it up a notch higher. And so, you know, all of us will approach it in different ways. Everyone here on this panel does something unique, although all of us do something very similar. And so how do we respect that in building coalition? And I wrote this down as I was listening to Damien and just listening to different folks. I said, how to build coalition with dealing with tools of white supremacy. And I just want to lay out what those tools look like from my perspective. What I have, you know, it's been almost 30 years. I know I look like I'm 13 years old, but I'm not, no. Thank God, right? But I'm not. And I've been in this work for over 30 years. And I'm so blessed to have sat at the feet of so many individuals in this room, outside of this room, that I've learned from. And I've watched so many things happen in this movement. And you know, when you're a child of the movement, you hear and learn things that they didn't think you were paying attention to. That's what happens with the kids. They see things that we don't mean to expose them to, but they catch on. And they either become it or try to change it and go in a different direction. And I find myself sometimes in both places with things that are good and bad, if we're going to be real about who we are and what we bring to the table in this moment. And so the things I wrote down, which are things that I feel are hindering us from building coalition, is number one, the fear of being canceled. The fear of being canceled. That we're so worried about what will happen if people don't like us. And too often that means when white people don't like us, then we want to stay away from folks that we actually need to be building with, because the people we're trying to reach, while they may love us, it's dope when you bring somebody that looks a little different along with you to have conversation. I remember that the reason why my son and I, we work very closely together, and one of the reasons why we made a pact that we can do this and build a movement together, it was because I was speaking at a school with some students. In fact, it wasn't a school. I was speaking at a school inside of a prison. And I was talking to these young people, and they were looking at me like, you cute, but I don't know what you talking about. And a few weeks later, I felt awkward. In a few weeks, because I don't come from their circumstances. That's the truth. Like, I grew up in the projects in Harlem, and I know a little bit about it, but I was adjacent. I didn't live through their circumstances. My parents have been married for over 50 years. They didn't have parents. They were hungry. I didn't have those circumstances. So trying to speak to their core was very difficult because I just didn't have the experience. And so when I met my son, I was listening to him speak one day, and I was like, yo, you gotta come with me. Because if I say my thing and then introduce you and then you speak to your experience, you can capture people who they may catch me because of whatever things, but I can't necessarily hold the conversation. So the fear of being canceled makes us run away from our own people. And I could talk more about the difficulties of the relationship even with my son and me, because it's some things that I don't agree with and some things that have actually hurt both of us in this movement together, because people say, well, you know, he ain't saying the right thing on this issue, or, you know, I'm not walking and looking and speaking a certain way. And so we've had some challenges there, but I know we're stronger together. So we have figured out a way to respect one another and work together anyhow. So then the next tool of white supremacy in building coalition is our C3 and C4 statuses. We are so beholden to the status, and that system knows that it has us in a grip, that if you move the wrong way based upon your status or seem to align to other individuals or groups that are not directly in line with your status, then you can lose your funding, you can lose all those things, and that's another issue. And I'm not saying I have the answer to all these things, I'm just laying out what I see to be problematic. Next is being politically correct versus radical. People are afraid of the use of the term radical. They don't even want that stated around them. And I'm, for one, I know, because I call myself radical as often as I can, and there are people who don't like that. And some folks are people we know. They're not in this room right now, but we know them, that they have actually shut me out of places. They have gone into spaces to talk about our work, that they know we're doing the work, and they went to the meetings to have the conversations and to collect the checks, because they knew that the people who they were talking to didn't want to talk to us. Because as Roland was talking about earlier, we force you to deal with accountability. So that issue, other labels, and then media campaigns that are anti-black, anti-woman, and anti-LGBTQIA. Those are other issues that and of course, anti-black man, but that's an issue that we're all constantly trying to chisel away at. But even sometimes in our movement, black men, getting them to address the issue of anti-black womenism, if you will, and the other issues is very, very scary. So we're building coalition, and I'm almost done here. I talked about anti-LGBTQIA, but that is yet another issue that we deal with, gender and orientation. In our movement, it is difficult to build coalition because that is an issue that our people have still not settled on where we are, even though there's nothing to settle on because it is what it is. And then last, I got one before last. And then I'm done for real. And I don't want to say nothing else. I gotta go to the airport. But the last two, who's invited to the White House and who's not? Who can go to the meeting and who can't go? Who's on the list and who's not on the list? And that's why I appreciate Melanie, because I know for sure that even if I can't go, she's gonna make sure my voice is heard in that meeting. Before she goes to the White House, she's gonna call and say, what's the points y'all want me to raise, and convene a group of people to make sure she's on point from the ground up when she goes into those rooms. But not all of our people are doing that, and therefore folks are making decisions on an entire movement without knowing where the movement stands. So people feel left behind, and therefore, why would they want to be in coalition with you? You didn't provide space for them. And the last thing is, which it speaks to all of these issues, but funding. Yeah. There's not enough of it. and therefore we get into silos and don't build coalition because there's not enough for us to go around. And I would submit to you on this issue that if we were more closely aligned and if we show people a united front, we would have more money than we could ever even imagine, because we can raise money from our own people if they trust us and believe that what we're doing has their best interests at heart. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Tamika. Let me just say one thing. We're developing this institute here at Clark Atlanta, and the focus is on the South. But because we are focusing on the South, we are not saying that the problems are worse in the South. It's just that we are based here in the South. Many of the coalition partners are in the South, and there are opportunities. We see a lot of opportunities in the South, both for research, activism, organizing, et cetera. So I just want to make that clear, because often people say, oh, they're in the South because the South is so much worse. And Tamika has brought it out that, you know, New York is a conservative state. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm from the South. I'm from the South. And when I went up north, people used to talk about me and talk about my accent. I was trying to change my accent. And then I looked around and I said, white women take advantage of that Southern accent. They draw it out. And men be saying, oh, that's so cute. So we're going to be proud of being from the South. Let me keep going, because I don't want to go somewhere I don't need to go, and before Mel come up here and pull me off the stage. Okay, let's talk about education. We have Brandon Cahey here from the NEA. So talk about the condition of education in the South.
And thank you for that, Dr. Scott. And so I'm so glad to be here with you all today, bringing greetings on behalf of NEA President Becky Pringle and our 3 million members from across the country that touch 50 million public school and college students every day. So I'm so glad to be here, and would be remiss if I do not thank Melanie Campbell for her unrelenting service and transformational leadership, and for really convening us today. So let's give her a round of applause one more time. And I'm also glad to be among the panelists here. And so as we really think, and I'm taking this also from my sister Tamika and Damon as well, as we think about the constant challenges and the attacks that are happening on our democracy, and as I'm specifically talking about education, doesn't it seem to everyone here that it seems as if we're being attacked from every single angle? It doesn't matter the way that you look at it, we are being attacked at every front. And so last week, I had the opportunity to hear from former Congressman Cedric Richmond, and he was speaking at the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists International Convention, where he shared what we're seeing is not simply culture wars. He said this is inherently and abruptly racism and discrimination. And as we think about that, he said, but what we have to do is we have to stand up, we have to speak out, and we have to demand action together. And that's what you've heard from some of the panelists that have already spoken. But as we think about that, and as we think about our education system, we all have a shared and common goal of ensuring that our students, that our young children are able to thrive and survive in their communities. We have a common understanding that we want them to grow into their brilliance, and that's why we do the work that we do every day. And so as I think about that, our communities, as I mentioned, are constantly being attacked, but we know that we're being, and specifically our black communities, are systemically impacted by unjust systems of inequity that show up every day. And yet, our young children and our students are directly impacted and are being hindered because of that. And for instance, as many of you saw a couple of weeks ago, I turned on CNN to see another instance of a young black boy being harmed by police officers in an unprovoked fashion. And as many of you may know and recall this story, this was a young 11-year-old boy in Mississippi. I listened to a CNN interview where he mentioned all I could do at the moment was just sing "No Weapons." And as many of you know that song, "No Weapons" by Fred Hammond, it says, "No weapons formed against me shall prosper." It won't work. But there's another caveat in that song that says, God will do what he said he will do. He will stand by his word. He will come through. And as we think about that, as this young man was recovering, and I heard that on CNN, it literally brought me to tears hearing that. Because it's our young people that are just trying to really grow into their brilliance, and they are depending on us. They are depending on us to ensure that they are able to do just that. Across the spectrum, as it's been mentioned by my sister Tamika, nationally and in the South, we're having attacks on our democracy all around. And it is showing up front and center in our schoolhouses. We have attacks on legislation that's showing up at the state and local level, specifically with woke laws. We have the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. We have the bans and censorship on books and learning. We have where our educators are not seen as practitioners in the classroom and yet are being dictated from states on what they can or cannot teach. We have to transform these systems in order to ensure that our students are able to really thrive. And so I'm so glad to be a part of this convening, so glad to be a part of this organizing and strategy session so that we can truly ensure that our young people have a true future to look forward to. Thank you.
Thank you. While we're on the issue of students and young people, why don't we ask Mary Pat Hector to talk about the issues that RISE is working with and identified as priorities facing students nationally and particularly in the South.
And I know Melanie was going to get upset with me for going a little off topic, but this feels a little like nostalgia because my first panel ever, I was sitting beside Tamika Mallory, and Roland Martin asked me a question I couldn't answer. So I looked at her like a deer caught in headlights. And she was also the first person to give me my first organizing job at 12 or 13 as the National Youth Director of NAN when she was the executive director. So now I can sit beside her and call and offer Until Freedom some money as the CEO of a national nonprofit organization. So it's good to be in this space. But particularly when it comes to young people and students. You know, in our organization, we're calling this the Summer of Accountability because right now there are not only attacks on the Black vote, but particularly the Black youth vote. And so while I can be up here in my RISE hat, I'm also up here in my Black youth vote hat because Ms. Helen's looking at me like, girl, you are a member of Black youth vote. You're going to talk about what we're doing within this organization. I will. But we're calling this our Summer of Accountability because in 2020, many young organizers knocked on doors. We made phone calls. We volunteered on campaigns, and we were promised criminal justice reform. We were promised free college. We were promised student debt forgiveness. And instead, all we've seen are attacks on the Black youth vote and our voting rights. We've seen attacks on just our access to education. Unfortunately, we did not get that free college we were promised, and it looks like people are throwing in the towel on student debt forgiveness, and so we'll see what that looks like, and most of our fate will be held regarding voting rights and affirmative action and student debt forgiveness in the Supreme Court this summer. And so for young people, those are the issues that are mainly important to us, but what's most important for us now is to hold those elected officials accountable that we advocated for and put our names on the line for in 2020. And with us approaching 2024, we're going to let them know now, these decisions that you're making in your final days leading up into that election, you're showing us who you're for and what you're for. And if it's not for us, then enough is enough. And so with this Summer of Accountability, I'm hoping with the discussions that we have over the course of the next day and a half, we will be able to begin thinking through how we're holding those elected officials accountable and how we are going to be able to get students the free college that was promised in 2020, the student debt forgiveness for borrowers, mainly Black women who are overeducated in this country trying to access the American dream. But some of our elected officials would rather give PPP loan bailouts than bail out Black women that are just trying to survive and access the American dream in this country. So those are some of the issues that are mainly important to our students, to their families, and I'm just excited to be in community with you all today and just be here and hear what some of our other panelists and coalition members have to say.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's shift to Dr. Joseph Jones, who's here at Clark Atlanta University, and we want to hear What are you seeing in the research? What is the research showing us about Black communities in the South?
All right, well, good afternoon. Let me start off by framing and grounding my comments by talking about this very special space at Clark Atlanta University. We're not an Ivy League institution, we're an Ebony League institution. And let me be clear about what that means. We're very clear about that we cannot just sit up here and just pontificate and do research and not actually be grounded with struggle, with people who are actually doing this. So everything that comes out of the center is tied to a grounding with people who are on the ground. And that's very, very important, I think, for everybody to know. The second thing I really want to say is that, you know, the Southern Center for the Studies of Public Policy has been around for 50 years, but it's just recently been renamed after W.E.B. Du Bois, who, if you all know, taught here at Atlanta University, which is now Clark Atlanta University. And out of that tradition, we are going to, you know, create research that focuses unapologetically on Black people here in the South, but not only just here in the South, but also the global South. So we have a domestic approach and we have an international approach, because we're very, very clear that the struggles that Black people focus on in here are always tied to an international struggle. But as we've been doing this research, one of the things that's become very, very clear to me, and clear to me, my graduate students, is that, you know, when we talk about the South, we think about it in these broad, sweeping terms. And the Black political experience is different in Louisiana as opposed to Mississippi. It's different in South Carolina as opposed it is to Florida. This semester, I taught a class called Southern Politics. And in this class, I was working with PhD students and master students, and we were basically, you know, going through the politics, Southern politics of the South. And one of the things that became very clear to us is that there really is no book that centers Black people in Southern politics. We're treated as addendums. We're treated as just people who are not very interesting. And so what we're doing in response to that is that we're going to actually create a book called Southern Black Politics that gets at the nuances of the Black experiences in all the various Southern states. And not only are we going to do that, as we're also going to produce a Status of the Black South report in February of next year, because we can't just have convenings once a year. It has to be ongoing. And what we want to be able to do is to provide research, is to provide data for all the people who are on the ground in their particular situation and in context to wage what I would call guerrilla public policy warfare, so that we can actually change the conditions in the unique conditions in each one of these states. So this is what we're doing, this is what we're seeing, and we're not going to take the cookie cutter template approach that mainstream political science does. We're going to do it from our perspective so that we can respond to the needs and improve the quality of life for Black people in the South. Thank you.
That's great news, because the reason why I came to Atlanta University for my PhD, I left my majority white school and came here was because Mac Jones said, we want to teach Black politics. So we came here, he attracted a whole group of Black people to Atlanta University at that time to get our PhDs, because it was going to be different from what I was getting at the University of Iowa, what people getting in Michigan, Michigan State, et cetera. So that's great, and I look forward to working with you all on that. Okay, let's hear from Alicia Gaza. I want you to talk about the work that you have been conducting around the Black census and what have been your findings so far.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Melanie, Sister Melanie, one of the things that you give us, that you gift us, is the spirit and the practice of longevity and what it means to be in it and stay in it, up, down, ebb, flow, like you, don't like you. Thank you for always loving us. Thank you for always loving us. I want to talk a little bit about the Black Census Project, and thank you for the opportunity to do so. The Black Census is the largest survey now in American history of Black people in America. Let me say that again. The Black Census is the largest survey of Black people in America in history. The Black Census was inspired by W.E.B. Du Bois. I read Black Reconstruction when I was 15, and I'm not saying that to brag. I didn't understand about 95% of it. But what I did get was an effort to better understand what it is that newly emancipated people were dealing with every single day and needed from their government in order to thrive. When we started this project, the idea of the Black Census Project was informed by a study of what is it that Black people are actually going through every single day, and what do we want to do about it? Not for the sake of just collecting data. We got a lot of that. But to put data into practice in the form of public policy that is informed by us, to put data into practice in the form of accountability for candidates who say they're going to do things for our communities, but then, number one, don't have any data to back it up, and number two, they always stop at certain things, right? They stop at a good plate of soul food. They stop at dancing with us, for us, around us, and they stop by saying things like, we're going to support entrepreneurship. We're going to train you to be a part of this economy. But none of that is bolstered by facts, data, or our needs and the things that we're stating that we want. The Black Census Project is also multidisciplinary, meaning we gather responses from people not just through surveys, okay? We do reach people on Facebook. You've probably seen an ad from us, Take the Black Census Project. But we also go out into communities and talk to people at their doors, on their porches, at their kitchen tables, and we resource grassroots organizations to work with us on that project. I see you, Ms. Deborah, thank you for your work on the Black Census. We have over 40 grassroots organizations that are Black-led that are a part of this project. The other thing I want to offer here, in terms of just some context about the Black Census, is that it is used to inform what we call a Black agenda. In 2020, when we completed the Black Census Project, we used that data for a Black Agenda 2020, which was a legislative roadmap for how it is that you make Black Lives Matter now. That Black Agenda was used in the response to COVID for Black communities. That Black Agenda was used to create domestic policy through the Biden-Harris administration. We are creating another Black agenda for 2024 using this Black Census. But we're beginning with a Black economic agenda. A couple of things I want to just highlight in terms of what we've learned so far. The Black Census is still open. So if you want to take it and you want to encourage other people to take it, please do. It's a nonpartisan survey. So anybody from any political background or belief can take the survey. We actually want that. You can take it at blackcensus.org. You can do it on your phone. It's real easy to do. We're up to about 80,000 responses right now. We're going for 200,000. 80% of the people who have responded thus far identify as Black or African American. 2/3 of the respondents so far, so we need your help. I'm looking at you. We need your help. 2/3 of the respondents so far are 40 and above. 2/3 of the people who have responded thus far identify as women. 3/4 of the people who responded say they have an unfavorable view of the Supreme Court. The most important issue that people have identified thus far, and did so also in the previous census, is low wages that are not enough to sustain a family. Other top-of-mind issues include gun violence, police officers not being held accountable when they commit crimes in our communities, white supremacist violence, which is a new question on this year's survey, and also schools that are failing to prepare children adequately. We understand what's happening in Florida, and it's happening across the country. Other things that are important to know about the Black Census a lot of the people who are taking it are politically active, but not with organizations. 2/3 say they take action, they sign a petition, they'll write a letter to a representative, a congressperson, but they're not doing that in conjunction with folks like us. I find that interesting. Other things that you should know from the census, 20% of people who responded don't identify as Democrat or Republican, they identify as independent. That's growing over time. And we all have different understandings of what independent means, but it doesn't matter. And then finally, you should know that 30% of the people who have responded to the census thus far describe their political views as moderate. Why does this matter for our political context as Black people? Well, number one, we have a challenge in the sense of engaging people, right, who rightfully so have a healthy critique of government, leaders, organizations, but that critique has devolved into cynicism and non-participation. So when we're talking about, we ask people, what do you identify as, and they say independent, they're not just talking about a political party. They're talking about independent of politics in this country. We have to think about how we want to deal with that and address that as we're going into yet another deeply important election cycle in this country. Other things that I think are important for us to just lift up in terms of why these initial findings are important. Candidates that we need to hold positions of power and move our agenda are saying the wrong things about what we care about. They're saying the wrong things about what we care about. We've had some victories, right? For the first time, we heard a sitting president address not just gun violence, but police violence. That's huge. However, in doing so, they also called for, in our names, an increase in the number of police. Now, what we found in the Black census is that people don't want more police. They want more services, but they see police as a service that's being defunded in our communities, just like schools, just like libraries, just like grocery stores and access to affordable housing. But when you ask people, what do you want to see done? They don't say, we want more cops on the street. They say, we want people to have access to the things they need so they're not committing crimes in our communities. And we want public safety. But it's not a carte blanche, more tanks, more guns, more police. And so, especially in a city like Atlanta that's dealing with Cop City, and these types of developments and projects are being launched all over the country, not just here in Atlanta, but $90 million for training for more police officers as opposed to affordable housing, as opposed to investing in schools, as opposed to increasing and changing people's economic conditions. So what's important about this census is that it's not conjecture. It's not conjecture. We don't all think the same. We don't all believe the same things. That's important for policymaking. But right now, there is a narrative about who we are, what we believe, and what we want that is actually hurting us, and policymakers are doing it in our names. With a project like the Black Census, we can interrupt that, intervene in that, and hold elected officials accountable to move our agenda our way based on data, not stories about what I think my homie wants. Now we can say, we talked to 200,000 Black people across the country, not just Democrats, not just progressives, but everybody across the political spectrum. And here are the themes and the trends, and these are the things that we want to see in public policy that will meet all of our needs. So please take the census and join us in helping to promote the census, blackcensus.org. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. We have 2 more speakers, and we are running well on time, I think, and maybe we'll have time for a round robin at the end. Okay, our next speaker is Sister Dee Marshall, and I want to ask her about the DEI issues. diversity, inclusion. I'm sorry. Wow.
I got it, Doc.
Thank you.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Equity would not come because I guess I don't see enough equity. Okay. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. We want you to talk about those issues and how will changes at the state level impact the Black community?
Yes. All right. So, I'll share two things. So, yes, part of the work that I do, or the full-time work that I do, some know is at Diverse and Engage, where we do diversity and inclusion work and supplier diversity for major corporations. And that is the work that I do. So I'll talk about that and then what's happening in Florida in terms of how that's going to impact us. So right now in businesses everywhere where we work, say work, somebody. Right now is we are 3 years from the diversity tipping point. The diversity tipping point, the period beginning May of 2020, when corporate America for the very first time said Black lives, air quotes, do matter. The first time was the diversity tipping point. Before that, in most corporations, in many corporations, I would say, Black people weren't really allowed to be Black outside of the employee resource group, okay? But at that moment, corporate America began prioritizing Black communities. Remember, they made charitable donations, charitable contributions to historically Black institutions because they woke up 3 years ago. Yes or yes? Okay. And they begin to prioritize Black people at work for the very first time. So that was a diversity tipping point. And why? Because we were amid a global reckoning of racism against Black people in this country. Okay, so that's the state of diversity and inclusion and the trigger, the driver for a lot of what happened and what has happened in the last 3 years. But y'all know what happened after the cameras were turned off, right? So we're at a place now where there's the idea, the theory that the Black window is closing. Those dollars and charitable contributions are no more. And so what happened is year one, they began making those, donations and such, but it was year one. Say year one. Year one. And then what was happening also was much more performative, much more external. But if you would ask your sister, your brother, your uncle, what's happening on your job, they would say, no, what's happening on my job right now is I'm still being paid less than my white cis male counterparts. You all see where I'm going. So it was, a lot of it was performative. Not all. There's, companies, corporations doing great work, but they weren't taking care of what was happening inside, meaning diversity in terms of diversifying workforce, improving the culture within the workplace, and then, promoting from within. My sister Tamika, who's probably outside right now, she really did and is a good case study as to what needed to be done. And what needs to be done right now is where we are spending our dollars and where we are investing. We have a responsibility to hold not just our elected officials accountable, but hold those businesses where you give your money, hold them accountable to. We can no longer be here as entry-level workers. We're looking here on your website, ma'am, sir, and I don't see anybody who looks like me. Are y'all following that story, right? You could just go to Tamika's IG, and it's a great case study. So I'm framing, I know we're talking about the state of Black people in America, both national and in the South. And so I just wanted to frame this diversity, equity, inclusion because you hear a lot about it. But the bottom line is the state right now is jobs are at stake right now because of the recession, black people are losing the jobs, right? They're the first to lose jobs, particularly in diversity and inclusion. And what happens when we lose jobs in major businesses, then the resources dry up. So for instance, the dollars that would come to our communities through partnerships and sponsorships and such, when you don't have people, it's just like politics. You don't have people there representing you. Now, they don't always have to look like us, but majority of the time when they look like us, they will understand the need here in terms of the resources to fund our community. Are y'all following the story? Okay. We're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, so that is somewhat of the landscape in that corporations who made commitments 3 years ago, those commitments, a lot of those commitments are no longer being honored. In fact, even, so diversity and inclusion is situational. Something happens, corporate America responds, right? So we're at D&I 3.0, the focus is on black, prioritizing black. But prior to that, we were at D&I 2.0. You know who that focused on? You know who was the focus? Gender diversity. When we say gender diversity, who are we talking about? We're talking about white women. That was D&I 2.0. You following the story? That was as a result of #MeToo. Do you see where I'm going? Diversity, equity, and inclusion is situational. Something happens, and then corporate America responds. And so then what happens after black, it was probably too uncomfortable, then it became black and Latinx, black and brown. Do you see? It was only for a minute that it could be black folks. And then what happened the next year, there's Asian hate, right? And what did they do? They copy, cut, and paste. So the dollars that went, let me say that again, the dollars that went to black communities after the diversity tipping point, by year 2 and 3, and I know you all know what I'm talking about because you all are asking and were recipients of the funding, yes or yes? You were recipients of the funding year 2, 3. And so that is what's happening in businesses everywhere, globally, nationally, and in the South. The black window closing, diversity and inclusion, unless we challenge and unless we hold corporations accountable. And so I'll say this, and then I will pause and with the last piece in terms of why I'm here. So so this impacts us. This diversity, equity, and inclusion impacts the community base. All of the funder, the advocacy groups here. It is helpful for us to have. We don't need it, but it's helpful for us to have the support. Why? Why is it helpful for us? And necessary for us to have those dollars and the support from corporate America. Why? To scale up, but why? Other reason? Because that's where you spend your money. They're profiting. Let's just say it one more time. Because see, somebody in the room said, well, we don't really need them. Well, girl, that's where you spending, you writing your checks, you banking with, you over at the big box store, and you mean to tell me you gonna leave the money on the table. Is it making sense? Yes or yes, somebody? This is the diversity, equity, and inclusion story. And so the sponsors who are here, we're so grateful that they're here, right? When you see these executives here who are funding and sponsors, we're grateful that they continue to do this. But know that the black window is closing. That's the state of diversity and inclusion. And here's what you need to do. It's you take and run the same play or a similar play as our sister Tamika. You ask the questions to where you are spending your dollars about diversity hires, about compensation, about leadership, about board, about community reinvestment, about supply chain. And when they say we have diverse suppliers and minority, first of all, we're not minor. Just say, like, we're not. But can you tease that out? Because when you say that your increase in diverse suppliers or minority suppliers is up, I don't know what you're talking about. I need you to tease that out. Talk about black people. Let's talk about black people. And so that is what and how we advocate on the private sector side. Does that make sense? Wherever you spend your money, and I'll give you the last play card, Buy stock shares where you spend your dollars. Buy the stock where you spend your dollars, where you're at once a week, because you're in the big box stores. Yes or yes? You're eating at the restaurants. You're staying at their hotels. I'm coming, Dr. Scott, right? And so you have a responsibility. So buy the stock share, buy a stock share so that you can go to the meeting and you can ask your questions at place of demand on big box stores. So I'll leave you with that. And I'm going to hand this back to Dr. Scott. My role here really is not the diversity standpoint so much as it is to give context, but it is as a senior advisor to the economic empowerment, it is to focus on the connection to entrepreneurship. And to make sure when we are doing business, like even the food service here, is it Sodexo or whoever it is, at some point, it was? Okay. At some point, we want to see more of that going to Black-owned businesses. So that is my time, and yeah.
Thank you, Sister Marshall. We're going to close it out with Brother Charles Steele. Why don't you talk about the priority civil rights, social, and economic issues that you see, and what are the challenges that are facing the Black community?
Let the church say amen. You know, Melanie is a good friend of mine. I've been knowing a long time. When I speak, I stand up because I'm so emotional. I don't do pounds. I don't do pounds. I'm doing it because of Melanie. My wife love her. She said, you know, you agreed to come out. I said, I did. It was my wife. She got my email. She said, Melanie wants you, you go out. So whatever Melanie wants, I'm here. Just 2 minutes, but I got something to say. Let me just talk. 5, 6 and a half. I just got in from, Melanie, thank you. I just got in from Webster University. How many folks know Webster University? In St. Louis. Okay. They just recognized SCLC in my leadership. Now, you can't agree on one thing. I've been president, CEO of SCLC for almost 18 years. Now, I ought to know a little something because they killed Dr. King. And I've been threatening them many a times. You know, I'm like Angela Batts in Black Panther. You know, I remember when she said, haven't I not given enough? Woo, Lord have mercy. And every time I get ready to take on a challenge for my people, I said, Lord, haven't I not given enough? I was the first Black state senator from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Since Reconstruction, was one of the first Black city councilmen. So I was a Black elected official for 18 years. I resigned my Senate seat to come to Atlanta 19 years ago to take over SCLC, the organization that 50% of Black folks hated Dr. King. Hello, somebody. 50%. And I'm in the position. When I took on SCLC, I took on the enemies of Dr. King. When I took on as president and CEO of SCLC, I took on the enemies of Dr. Abernathy, Dr. Joe Zalari. And I got my own enemies. Hello, somebody. Somebody broke out a wonder pain. We got a state-of-the-art civil rights organization building on Auburn Avenue. And every night somebody trying to destroy it. And it's not the Ku Klux Klan. Come on, somebody, talk to me. It's our folks. Black folks. My wife and I was going to Bonnie Jackson funeral. The late Maynard Jackson's wife. 6, 7 weeks ago, we drove up to our office, and this lady, homeless, got all her stuff in front of our office. and my wife was going to run in to get something. I said, no, baby, let me go. And I went in to get it, and she looked at me and she said, Negro, that's Dr. King's building. Go on with your little rich wife. Talking about my wife, who is poor. But she looked pretty every time she stepped out the house. Come on, black lady, talk to me. Come on, talk to me. Look at her, look how good she looked. But we are broke. But every time we need some money, the good Lord provides. Come on, somebody. She the keynote speaker in Jerusalem, July the 17th. The first lady of Israel inviting her. Hello, somebody. She's a retired educator, been married to me for 45 years and never divorced me yet. Been to jail. Friends told her, you still with him? But look at me, I'm still handsome. Hello, somebody. So the point is, the diameter of your mind determines the circumference of your environment. Woo! Hello, somebody. Did y'all get that? It's the way you think because of who you're around. Come on, talk to me. I'm going to talk to you. It depends on who you're around. I don't go to any kind of program because Negroes don't understand what I'm saying. They're not in my position. They don't know people hate me. They want to destroy SCLC. And like Tamika say, only certain folks get invited to the big parties. I'm supposed to be marching and demonstrating all the time. 3 ways to get educated, and we missed the boat on it. Doctor, when we took the trades out of school, woo, industrial, home economics. We said nothing. You lost the 1965 Voter Rights Act. You going back to state rights. Jim Crow. When was it done? June the 25th, 2013. I ain't gonna go no further than that, because y'all will get mad at me. Dr. King said, gather information. And number 2, educate the public. Why the public weren't educated? Because our elected officials don't have no courage. Thank you, I'm still talking to you. See, a lot of black folks don't want to hear the truth. You got to have courage. You might die for standing up for these things. My life is threatened every day. This lady looked at me as we were going to the funeral, and I was coming out of the building, was throwing a cup of coffee in my face. Show you how good the Lord is. And I had on my best suit going to the funeral. The coffee went that way, and the good Lord turned it over. That was nobody but the Lord. And my wife told the lady, Dr. King was a great man, still great in the spirit. But my husband built this building. It wasn't Dr. King. So we praise the dead and we murder the living. That's what we do. Oh, everybody loves Dr. King now. 50% of us didn't like him. He was set up by black folks to die. I know I ain't coming back to another program, but I'm going to close with this. Hey, I got my 1 more minute, and I'm going to tell it. And there's one thing about white schools. I'm glad I'm here at Clark, Atlanta. Thank you, Doc. I speak at Yale. She'll tell you, she's spoken at Yale. I'm speaking at Yale in August. UCLA, just left University of Alabama. Speaking University, well, I did leave Alabama A&M last week. Hello, somebody. I spoke at Alabama A&M, and they wouldn't let me out of there. But as I close, This is the last point. Economics. That's the only thing gonna free black folks. Money. The transatlantic African slave trade was because of money. So let me close with this. I see the two of them coming together. Oh, hey, she told me, keep on. I'm going on, y'all. They told me to keep going. Thank you so much. Look at you. They told me, Melanie, it wasn't me. The people told me.
Which ones?
All up here. We are majority. Economics, number one. Politics, number two. Reading politicians don't respect us because we don't have no money. Politics is about who gonna get the money. That's what politics is about. Number three, law enforcement. We got to control law enforcement. Number four, the media. We got to control the media. Oh, I got to pay. 3 ways to get educated after you get your formal education. Read, travel, and build relationships. I'm finished, y'all. The last one, number 5, is education. That's why I see I'm writing it down. See, that's what I like. Write it down because I paid a price for this. I paid a price. My wife and I travel the world, and I know the world is dependent on SCLC. They don't know no other organization but Dr. King's. Ain't nowhere in the world I can't go and get attention and talk to the leaders. They always ask us, what's the next move? It's love. You got to love one another because love is what love does. And I'm out of here, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brother Steele. And give a big round of applause to our whole panel here. Wait. Brother Steele, you need to stay on the stage. You took up all the time. Now you get to stay up here and we need a picture. Okay, so we'll have to try to get our panel picture some other. Okay, thank you all so much give our panel a big round of applause. Melanie, I think I did pretty good with staying on time.
All right. Can we give our facilitator, moderator extraordinaire, Dr. Elsie Scott, a thank you round, and all of our leaders here. Thank you all so very much. How we doing? How we doing on time? We on time? We right on time? We right on time or off time? So we're going to get up and stretch while we transition to the next panel. Thank you all so very much. All right. So, can take a stretch. We're going to go right into our next Power of the Ballot, Rights, Freedom, Justice, Organizing, and Strategy session. That will be led by Roland Martin. And if we could get Terrence Woodbury, I don't know if Cliff Albright is in the room, Y.T. Bell, Kairu Crimes, Abdul Dasun.
Of Brazil, I met a young brother that made me feel that
The guys need to come over and help him. Oh, well, Roland's moderating this, so I don't know. Okay. Yeah, just what y'all can sit anywhere, any of the chairs. You don't have to be. Okay. No. We're gonna call.
When I move my body just like this, I don't know why, but I feel like freedom. I hear a song that takes me back, and I let go with so much freedom. I'm gonna get it, 'cause it's my freedom.
I got you. Just listen. I'm only watching the TV. Don't need to talk to me. I got it, okay? Solo shot. We're about to go live. You got the solo shot? Hey, folks, today is Wednesday, May 31st, 2023, coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. We are live here in Atlanta talking about black politics and the future of black America. For the next hour, we'll hear from our panelists assembled here on what we have to do to prepare for not only elections in 2023, but also in 2024. It is time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Terrence, are you up? Yourself is ready? Do. All right, coming back, give me a wide shot of the room, and then get prepared to do the intro. All right, let me know when we go live. You can clap now. All right, folks, we're here in Atlanta for the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation. Put your hands together, y'all all here. Folks from all across the country meeting here, talking about, of course, planning for our upcoming election, but also organizing and mobilizing. That's what our focus is over the next hour. We'll be, of course, talking about a variety of issues. Got a number of panelists here ready to get started. But first off, Terrence Woodbury is going to kick this thing off to lay out what the data is so we can understand what really is at stake when it comes to our politics. So, Terrence, take it away.
Thank you so much, Roland. Thank you for having me. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thank all of you fearless leaders. Let's give Melanie Campbell a round of applause for her fearless leadership. This year's. My name is Terrence Woodbury. I am a political scientist trained here in the AUC, right at Morehouse College. I hear Morehouse in the room. Okay. But it's great to be back home. The AUC is home to us. This is where we sharpen our teeth. This is where I learned the rigorous collection of data and application of that data towards our politics. I own Hit Strategies. It is the largest minority-owned polling firm in Washington. Come on, y'all. We are recruiting and training and deploying black political scientists. I see some young people in the back of the room. We are recruiting you. We need you. We need to change who's asking the questions to change the answers that we're getting. We are, I'm gonna present some data here. I'm not gonna bore you, but I do wanna ground us in the data. I'm not gonna talk to you about my opinion. I'm gonna talk to you about the opinions of the black voters that we speak to every day. Last year, we conducted 200 focus groups. We conducted over 40 polls. That's almost every other day, and at least almost every week we were polling. We keep our finger on the pulse. And so let's go to the next slide here. I'm gonna walk around so I can see what's going on. This is gonna be the most words I'm gonna give you. The rest of it's gonna be data, I promise you. What you have here is what we have identified as the challenges that we saw with black voters in 2022 and some of the strategic guidance to fix that ahead of 2024. Before I go any further, I want to be clear here. Black voters are the consumers, right? You don't blame the consumer when they stop buying the product, you fix the product. And so I want to be clear here. The challenges I'm talking about are not black voters' problems. These are the problems with the system, the problems in our politics that are affecting the way black voters show up. Number one, the gender and the generation gap between black voters persist. I want to be clear here because we hear a lot about the gender gap between black men and black women. We do not talk enough about the generational gap between younger black voters and older black voters. I always say black seniors are my favorite voters in the electorate because we know they're going to vote and we know who they're going to vote for. That is not true of younger black voters. They are not always voting, and when they do, they're not always voting the way that we expect them to. So what's the strategic guidance here? We need deeper investment, greater insights, targeted messaging. We must improve perceptions of messaging around economic conditions, number one. That's where we're losing a lot of black men and where we're losing a lot of younger black voters. It's around the economy. We got to change the way we talk about the economy. And an example of that is, you know, we talk a lot about poverty reduction. Well, not all black folks is poor. And where Republicans start to, specifically Donald Trump starts to make some progress is when he starts talking about wealth creation. It's a very different economic proposition. The other guidance is we have to connect social issues, progressive issues, to black values. Specifically, when I'm talking about black men, I'm talking about my daddy, who is a captain in the military, raised his family. The values that he holds closest, values like masculinity, it ain't all toxic, so start there, not all masculinity is toxic. Faith, specifically Jesus Christ, this ain't blind faith, this is a faith with a name. Family, you know, patriotism. My father still cries every time he hears the national anthem. Those ain't Republican values, those are black values. And we have to reclaim those and position our progressive issues through black values. Number two, black surge voters. Those are the voters that show up periodically. They show up sporadically. Black surge voters are cynical to the promises of politicians. They don't trust our promises anymore, even the ones they like. They don't believe Barack Obama is going to do what he says he's going to do. And he got a 96% approval rating. So what do we have to do? We have to change the messenger. We must become the hero of our story. We need to tell us how our votes made our lives better. Example of that, I was in a focus group in Philadelphia where I gave them a list of all the progress that had been made. Child tax credits and climate, and I mean, the list goes on. And as I was going through the list, the young brother sitting across from me was getting angry. And I asked him, why are you shaking your head and sucking your teeth? These are good things that are happening. He said, because I can't access none of this. My sister just got evicted last week. She ain't getting no child tax credits. She ain't getting no rental assistance. So before we go into 2024 and tell them all the progress we've made, if they can't access it, it's just going to piss them off. In that same focus group, though, there was a sister sitting across from that young man who said, wait, can I respond to that? Because I got that child tax credit. And during the pandemic, I lost my job. The courts were closed. I couldn't even get child support. And if it wasn't for that child tax credit that I spread across 3 months, I would have been evicted just like your sister. I watched him shifting. I watched him go from shaking his head to nodding his head. She convinced him. She was the messenger. That's how we tell us how our votes are making our lives better. Not a great white hope in Washington. It's because you voted that we've been able to accomplish all of these things. Number three, black surge voters feel less powerful. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about this connection between power and participation. But they feel less powerful because the last election has not resulted in the meaningful change in their lives. Well, look, Alicia Garza was just up here talking about the black policy agenda. That is something that we worked on with her. We helped build that policy agenda, but then we started tracking the progress against that agenda, and we found that 80% of the things that black folks said that they wanted to see this administration do have either been started or completed. 80%. But 76% of black people say that their lives have not gotten better since Joe Biden became president, despite 80% of the agenda being completed. So what do we have to do? This is what we call click here messaging. This is probably the most important thing on this slide. Click here messaging. When we needed their votes, we delivered to the palm of their hand. Click here to access your ballot. Click here to find your polling place. Click here to encourage your friends to vote. Click here to promise Joe Biden you're gonna vote. Click here to make a plan to vote. Well, now they need to click here to access the millions of jobs created by the infrastructure bill. They need to click here to access applications for student loan forgiveness. Click here to see the lead pipes being replaced in your neighborhood. They need to, this is not about a message that tells them that we're making their lives better. We have to make their lives better. Finally, defending democracy. In 2022, defending democracy was the second biggest issue that Democrats spent money on. The number one was abortion. I expect that to be the same in 2024. They are going to position this election as being on the front lines of democracy. The problem is black folks have had mixed results with democracy. And so they don't want to just defend a thing that isn't working for them, especially young black people who have voted several times for a candidate that got the most votes and still lost. They don't want to defend that system. Simple shift here. I'm not saying stop talking about democracy, but instead of defending democracy, we got to talk about fixing democracy. Fixing democracy requires progressive, small d democratic reforms. Abolish the Electoral College, automatic voter registration, universal polling precincts. Why does it matter that I drive 40 miles from my job? Why can't I walk into any of these precincts, give them my ID, and cast my vote? This don't make sense to young people. In fact, they don't understand why they can't vote on their phone. There's nothing more secure than biometrics. I mean, you know, Republicans trying to secure elections with IDs, ain't nothing more secure than biometrics in your phone. You know exactly who's casting that vote. You got fingerprints and pupils and everything else. Okay? Universal term limits. Ooh, they don't like this one. They really don't like this one. But young people don't understand why anyone sits in office for 65 years. The world has changed, and so should the leaders that are leading it. Next slide, please. All right, let's get to the data. Next slide, please. This is the centerpiece of all of the research. Let me time check myself. Centerpiece of all the research we do is this correlation. Oh man, I'm at 10 minutes already, and I had 10 minutes. All right, y'all, let me get 3 slides real quick. The centerpiece of our work. You know, a lot of pollsters ask the question about enthusiasm. We hear a lot about, you know, enthusiasm is low. Well, black folks don't always vote enthusiastically. And just because they ain't enthusiastic don't mean that they're not voting. I had a young black man tell me in focus groups in Florida, he doesn't vote enthusiastically. Voting for him is like taking out the trash. He don't want to have to do it all the time, but if he don't do it, it starts to stink around here. That's a quote. So we changed our enthusiasm question to a power question. Regardless of how often you vote, how much power do you believe your vote has to make a difference in your community? The higher they rate those perceptions of power, the higher their likelihood to vote. It is a direct correlation. That means we don't want to convince them to just tell us that they're going to vote, but we want to convince them that their vote can make a difference. In 2020, 73% of black folks in Georgia said they felt extremely powerful. In the same election, 70% of black folks in Georgia voted. It's also the highest black turnout anywhere in the country. So give Georgia, give yourselves a round of applause. What's happening here needs to be replicated, okay? But we also saw, I'm trying to export it, trust me. What's up, Cliff? We're gonna talk about that later. But we've seen that those perceptions of power drop when we're not in election time anymore. From 73%, a 30-point drop. Well, I could tell you right now, if we have a 30-point drop in turnout from black folks, we have lost every single battleground state. And so in 2022, we start to recover some of those perceptions of power, but if we stop letting it drop, then we don't got to dig ourselves out of this hole. When we asked them why did these perceptions of power drop, they told us explicitly. It was high in 2020 because they felt like they were a part of something, because they were being courted, because Stacey Abrams and Governor Kemp were both texting them every day. That's what made them feel powerful, because their teachers were talking about it, their pastors were talking about it, their mamas was talking about it. The election ended, they stopped getting those text messages. People stopped talking about it. Next slide, please. I'm gonna just skip ahead, skip that one. Okay, here we go. This is the gender and the generation gap. I'm gonna give you 2 more slides. Some we got here. These are not poll numbers. These are actual election results from 2022. At the top there, you see the gender gap. 87% of black women voted for Republicans, 78% of black men voted, 87% of black women voted for Democrats, 78% of black men voted for Democrats. That is an 18-point margin gap, 18 points. But look at the generation gap underneath there. Younger black voters voted for Republicans at even higher rates, 21-point margin gap. Next slide, please. Why is this happening? Here it is. Here's one of the reasons why. There's several. One of them are issues. This is when we ask who's better on the following issues: Democrats, Republicans, both or neither. At the top there, you see the Democrats in blue, you see Republicans in red. But look at the top. Democrats have an overwhelming advantage on all the social issues: voting rights, abortion, health care, 60, 70-point advantage over Republicans. But when you look toward the bottom there, the things that black men, providers in the household, the things that they are prioritizing, economy, inflation, those advantages begin to shrink. Next slide, please. Well, here's what happens when you look at just black folks under the age of 50. The advantage disappears. Republicans just as good on the economy as Democrats. If I was advising Republicans how to target black voters, I would only talk to the 28% that say Republicans are better than Democrats on inflation. That's it. Let's just go get that 28%. Next slide. That's exactly what they're doing. Okay, this isn't the slide. Next slide. Next slide. All right. A part of what we have to do here is when we talk about power, political power, I've asked folks in focus groups, what does political power mean to you? They only describe the first one, the power to elect the people that we want, electoral power. A part of what we have to do is expand that cycle of power. Your political power ain't just about your vote. That's the beginning of the power. Literally, the first step, not the last. The cycle of power means after we've elected them, we get to negotiate, moving them closer to our position. After we negotiate, we get to hold them accountable. Also called protest power. We get to stand outside that office and say, remember that thing we talked to you about? We're going to show up every day until it happens. The last one, young people really like, you get to fire their asses when they don't do it. Punitive power means we can fire them. Throughout that cycle of power, we got to keep talking about progress. We got to keep giving them information. This is the game, folks. If we don't make them feel more powerful, we cannot ask them to show up and do this thing again. That was literally 6 of my 20 slides, so I'm gonna make sure we distribute this. Thank you all so much.
All right, Terrence, great information there. We're going to go to our panelists right now, and I'm going to start with Cliff Albright, co-founder of Black Voters Matter. Cliff, we talk about this a lot on my show. I'm always talking about connecting the dots, and I think one of the things that we don't do is we don't connect the dots, and that is in talking to people. Charles, sit down, man. The panel is going on. You're just walking up on the doggone stage speaking to people. I'm gonna have your wife just cut you. All right. So again, part of this deal is how do you connect the dots? Because I think when I look at those economic numbers, when that 28% saying Republicans are better, that's because they're actually messaging that. if you don't explain to folk how things actually are, then if that's all I'm hearing, oh, they're better, you're bad, then I believe it. We have to learn to connect the dots.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Roland, and thank you to this great panel. I feel like I'm at the kiddie table at Thanksgiving. Like, what's up? But yeah, no, we gotta connect the dots. We talk about it all the time. We call it the 365 work. You know, we got to show that Black Voters Matter 365, and we got to show that what we are prioritizing are our issues, our community issues. We always say if the first words out your mouth when we're doing our canvassing or doing any of our activities, if the first words out our mouths are you registered, then we've already failed, right? Because that shows that what we're centering is the registration, right?
Right.
We're not centering their issues. We're not centering the economics. We're not centering the infrastructure, the utility bills, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to have a different conversation. People ask, what's the best way for us to get ready for 2024? And we say, well, first we got to deal with 2023. Like, you already jumping forward to what you have decided.
School board elections, city council elections, judicial, DAs, those elections.
All those elections, those local elections, and a lot of that happens in these odd number years. There's no such thing as an off year. So we got to be doing it each year. We got to be doing it all year round, and it's got to be centered on those issues that folks care about. Not just on the candidates, not just on an every 2-year election cycle, but on all those issues that Terrence was just talking about. That takes time, and it takes money. It takes resources, and that's what all of us have got to be fighting for, right? Because at the end of the day, money wasn't flowing last election cycle the way it should have been flowing. If they really wanted the folks in this room to help, as Terrence says, defend democracy, improve, fix democracy, whatever you call it, they weren't making the money flow that helps that to be able to happen, to help us and the communities and the groups that we work with to make that happen. So it takes time and resources to have the kind of deep conversations that we need to be having for our communities, because we got this crazy notion that if we just talk to our folks more, then they will show up. If we talk to our folks more, if we get more door knocks, and if those conversations are substantive about their issues and tying into, like Terrence said, how folks can actually benefit from some of these things that they're talking about on these networks. When we do that, then our folks show up.
Desmond Meade, you led that effort in Florida, and a huge, huge part of what y'all did to be successful in passing Amendment 4 was to educate folk first. As Cliff said, you can't sit here and get somebody to register unless they're educated on what the issue is. And so just talk about, in putting that together, how that can be replicated when we're talking about these other electoral offices, because again, what was the final number of the passage number there in Florida?
65%.
65% of folks in a so-called red state voted to restore voting rights of formerly incarcerated. I mean, that was a huge issue. So just talk about the education part you had to do.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Roland. I think the other piece to that I think needs to come into this room and stay in this room throughout this entire conference is who's the educator, right? Now, let me tell you, over the past 10 years, the biggest gains we have seen in democracy, whether it was the 1.4 million in Florida, whether it was the thousands of folks in Louisiana or North Carolina or even California, recently in New Mexico and Minnesota, have a common ingredient. At the center of all of those movements were directly impacted people, returning citizens. Right? And so we are the best educated. And so as we were going out into those communities, you know, we realized, and this was something that I kind of like, it came to me when, you know, thinking about the civil rights era, right? When I used to hear the stories about how when mom and dad went to vote, man, they dressed up the kids and everything, and it was like, put everybody in their Sunday's best, and they went and voted. Right? But then I started thinking about when you strip mom and dad of the right to vote, you kill a conversation at the dinner table. All right? Now there's shame associated with it. And so the very same people who've been stripped of the right to vote are what I felt was the key ingredient in re-energizing or revigorating a conversation about voting. And so and they were the ones who needed to lead the message right? And they was the ones who needed to actually engage the individuals who were not voting that could vote, which was family members and friends. And I always, sometimes my wife get mad at me when I use this terminology, but I'm talking about the Pookies and the Ray Rays, right? The ones that we don't want to talk about, or we forget about, or we gloss over, right? We drive past a whole bunch of Pookies and Ray Rays that we don't talk to get right here where we at today, right? And those are the same people who have a lot of influence over people who are not voting. So prior to the Amendment 4 thing, one of the big things we've seen was that in gubernatorial elections, which historically was decided by 60,000 votes, you had at one point 808,000 registered African Americans that didn't think it was important enough to go vote, right? 912,000 registered Latino Americans. So you had 1.7 million people of color who was registered that didn't even bother to go vote in an election decided by 60,000 votes. And then the very next cycle, that number jumped up to 1.1 million and 1.3 million respectively, right? Those folks, the majority of those folks are related to Pookie and Ray Ray. And when they hear Pookie and Ray Ray talk about, man, my vote don't count, and the only reason I'm saying my vote don't count, it don't matter who get in office, is because deep down inside, I'm using this as a coping mechanism because you all have told me as a person with a criminal history that my voice don't matter and I'm not a part of society. Matter of fact, I'm not even good enough to be in your church, right? And so I think that just a natural human instinct is to be a part of something bigger. And we've seen that come out during the 2020 election. But I think what's said at this education piece is allowing the Pookies and the Ray Rays to be empowered, right, to be the educators, right? I think Tamika talked about that, when she was up here, that my son was the one who had to come in and actually carry some of that load because these are the people who we need to get. And so I think we did an amazing job. We was able to get like 5.1 million people. 5.1 million people to say yes, and that was 1 million more people than who voted for our current governor right now. So education works.
And Marsha, on that point, you're the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law, and he's a perfect example. I see these message boards, and we're live on the show, and I see these people on social media saying that when Biden talks about naming Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court, they go, oh, well, that's performative. But again, I think the mistake, though, is we assume everybody knows how the federal judiciary works. We assume they know how these things work, and yet when I start walking folks through by saying one judge in Amarillo made a decision that affected the entire country, they go, oh, hold up, one? They're not thinking that way. So again, this is where I think the education comes in. We have to take these very specific actions and show how one appointee, one judge, one Supreme Court justice, one person in the agency, and who is the person in office who's picking those folks can have a direct impact on the lives of black folks.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think rather than focus on the elections, we need to focus on the offices and what those offices bring to the issues that people care about. And there are a lot of people who held their noses, they would say, and supported Donald Trump because they saw the prize as being the Supreme Court. And that is an office that isn't elected.
Well, they saw the surprise at the Supreme Court because they knew what the Supreme Court does.
A lifetime appointment by the president, right? And now we're here shaking in our boots, waiting to see what they're going to do about the Voting Rights Act, what they're going to do about education. We already know what they did about reproductive choice. And they are feeling emboldened because we have a Congress that is dysfunctional. And it always gets back to what does the office do?
So I want to connect what you're saying to Terrence's research. And Joe Madison always says, you got to put it where the goats can get it. And how do you make it plain? So when you talked about Voting Rights Act, okay, person hears that, it's kind of like, okay. But what Terrence's research shows is when we say, are you pissed off they closed down your polling location? that's because the Supreme Court did this here. And so again, that's sort of his research shows if we explain it that way, then the person goes, oh, so that's what them 9 cats did with the voter. That's what they did with the Voting Rights Act. We have to explain it sort of that way where they now understand, yeah, this is why you now have to go through all your loopholes to get a voter ID or polling location closed down, stuff along those lines.
Exactly, and that's why your state keeps passing these laws that make it harder and harder to vote. And each time, each election after we jump over the barriers, they look at how we got over those barriers, and then they close off that avenue to be able to get to the ballot. And we have a Congress that isn't doing anything. So I definitely agree with you. It's connecting what do you want to see? Who has an impact on the criminal justice system? It's the prosecutors who are elected. It's the judges who decide. You care about your school board. What is this, you care about your schools. What is the school board doing? Look at the state legislatures who have such enormous power right now that are drawing the district lines that are taking away our right to be able to elect a candidate of choice. And so we need to really take away this just looking at elections to have the conversation and to talk about the offices, and as was mentioned, talk about all the different ways of power in which we engage. It's not just about casting a vote. That's one act of power. But we really need to confront all of these offices and to continuously do so, not just around when we hear about elections and someone is saying, okay, now it's time I'm paying attention to you. We need to take the onus upon ourselves to really go confront those elected officials, put our issues before them, and make sure that they're doing the right thing.
Kairu, you were at SCIU, and when the Janus decision came down, many people in the labor movement thought that was going to be the death knell. What ended up happening was, and I was talking to Lee Saunders about this, what happened was the labor movement had to go back and figure out, we got to change our messaging. And what ended up happening was they went back to basics, started explaining to people what labor unions do, and what we've now seen in the aftermath of Janus is the highest approval rating of labor unions that we haven't seen in 50 years. And so that movement had to go back and reassess, because what he basically said was the labor movement got lazy and had to go back and do the basic blocking, tackling to walk people through, and now you're seeing an increase in people now trying to organize and mobilize with unions, whether it's Starbucks and Walmart, other. So just talk about how folks out here, how we have to think about the same thing. Yeah, the courts are doing what they're doing, but how we got to go back to basics to rebuild this momentum leading to the next few elections.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. It's so nostalgic. First, I want to say thank you, Brother Martin, for that. Thank you to the panel. Thank you, Melanie, for having me in this space. But I was on that Janus team, just to go back. When that went down, we formed an internal team to figure out how we were going to reshape the narrative around unions and how we were going to rethink our work and rethink our strategies and approach to the electoral side, to the union side, to worker rights, just a revamp. And I remember sitting in this room with the leaders of SEIU, explaining to them some of the shifts that we're seeing on the civic engagement side, on the electoral side, in politics, and how we needed to sort of move with the times and move with the current obstacles. And it ended up being revelational and revolutionary. I think we've really opened our scope as to how we viewed a voter. A voter is simply a human, a multifaceted human being who cares about a lot of things, and it includes labor unions, but it is not totally all about ballot boxes and unions. It's about explaining to people in plain language how unions and electoral politics make your life better, and it's saying it in words that they actually care about and understand, and it's not transactional rhetoric. It's actually community empowering, game-changing statistics and facts, and you're listening to the people that you're talking to. You go to the door with these scripts, You go to the door with this script about why unions are great and why politics is great, and you lose the person because they're not seeing great. They're seeing struggles. They're seeing transactional. They're seeing people parachute into their community, snatch their vote, and then ghost them, and then show up 2 to 4 hours later with another sales pitch. That's what it looks like. It's just simply a sales pitch, and it's a transaction. So when we sat down in that room, we created an entire department, a whole department that was dedicated to reframing, reshaping, and understanding how to do the work.
YT, you were the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and so what I'm about to say, some folk may say, dang, he really went there. And I hear this a whole lot from a lot of folk. We are very good at saying black and brown, black and brown. But it's a lot of black folks who are saying, I'm looking at the Latino numbers, where in the hell are the brown folks showing up for us? So part of this also is going to have to be, when we're out messaging, we're going to have to say, if we're talking to black folks, black and black, because we have to understand the numbers are there. They are seeing, and a lot of black folks, especially younger voters, don't want to hear black and brown because they're saying, no, what about black? So speak to how organizers must be understanding the language, if you will, the love language, if you will, of these voters, because if you come to some folk with black and brown, they're going to immediately turn you off by saying they don't give a damn about us. How we may have to readjust our messaging to absolutely center and focus black, black, black.
Yeah, we have to be overly intentional about, and being culturally competent too, around when we're talking to black people around their issues, and those are not people of color issues, because the issues that black people face are completely different and are seen differently than our counterparts. And to your point, Roland, when they show up to the polls, they don't always vote with us, right? It takes a lot of efforts from a lot of the groups on this ground, on this panel today, to kind of bring them along. And so when you're talking to black and brown folk, well, black folks in particular, you should be talking about the issues that they care about. Those are the kitchen table issues. And we also, when we're talking to black people, we often mention that there's not infrastructure in some of the places that they reside. That's not true. In black communities around the country, churches have been the infrastructure. Those barbershops, those, the hairdresser. If I trust you with my hair, I believe and I have a level of trust with you, right? And so when we're talking to them,
You trust somebody with your hair, you trust their ass. Yes.
Very true. So I think to the point that has been made today on the panel, we make sure that we get an appropriate messenger, and it doesn't look like somebody else that may have the resources or another organization to come in and talk to us about our issue. It needs to be another black person. But we also need to constantly educate people on what has happened and the impact. I know we talked about this a little briefly today, but ARPA funds were dispersed around the country. Those directly impacted people that were going through hardship, and COVID is gone, but the hardships are still there, and black people are facing them each and every day. And so to the message about accountability, this is a way where we hold the elected officials accountable and say, hey, like rent assistance is very much still needed. The eviction diversion plans are still needed. Legal assistance is still needed. And so that's how you bring some of those issues that are affecting black people each and every day to the forefront, and also holding elected officials to make sure that they're meeting them in this moment and making sure they're addressing their issues. And then also the multicultural coalition, which is what the Leadership Conference stands on, having over 240 national coalition members that bring the two, that, hey, y'all may not be the best messenger when you're talking to black people. Y'all should focus on this constituency and being honest about that as a coalition so that we can have the biggest impact and turn people out and make sure we have a message that resonates with them from their own community.
Abdul, I'm going to hit you with this one here. You may not be, y'all can clap, go ahead. Y'all go ahead. Definitely want to see your reaction to this one here. When I was battling a whole bunch of these crazy ADOS folk, they were complaining about black immigrants. Until I hit them with the data, 10% of black folks, based upon the census, are folks who are black immigrants. And so even when we're having this conversation, when we're talking about how we're going to reach black voters, we also have to understand that if we are, how do we message to black immigrants? Actually, the largest increase in the black population, if you look at the data, are black immigrants. And I don't think that's actually being talked about a lot in a lot of circles on how do you message to them, because you have to message to black immigrants differently than you do a brother who or sister from Alabama or somebody who's from North Carolina or South Carolina.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, Roland. Thank you, Melanie, for having me. I don't know how you knew my father was Nigerian, but you did.
I don't know. Abdul Dosunmu.
Dosunmu.
I just took a wild-ass guess. That question's for you, Abdul.
Well, you were
and
right.
I did Google your bio. I'm like, he ain't got no mention of his daddy in here or nothing. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Dad is Nigerian, mom is African American, but you're absolutely right. You know, I think it's important for us to understand the ways in which the strategy in many ways for the conservative right has been a strategy of division, right? The entire effort has been about dividing and conquering our coalition, right? Whether we're talking about the Black-Brown coalition or whether we're talking about the coalition among black people in the United States. And so it's important that we understand the power of coalitional politics, the power of bringing our communities together. And it's important for us to understand when we talk about black immigrants, Stokely Carmichael, right? Malcolm X. I mean, so many who have contributed to our movement.
Harry Belafonte, Cicely Tyson, Sidney Poitier.
Absolutely. But part of that conversation that we have to have is a very real conversation about the ways in which anti-blackness itself operates both here in the United States and around the world, right? And the ways in which many black immigrants have been convinced that the only way to get ahead is to distance themselves from African American communities, right?
Which means also we have to understand how that was exported to those places and not just, oh, that's how they think. No, that's how they were taught.
Absolutely. And it all comes back to education, which was your initial point, right? The work we do at the Young Black Lawyers Organizing Coalition is education work, right? Because what we understand in the landscape of voter suppression is that they can take a lot from you, but they cannot legislate away your knowledge. They cannot rule away your education and your knowledge and your understanding of these issues. And so you're absolutely right. Part of the work we have to do is to make sure we're educating our communities across the board about the strategies of the division, the tactics of division, and making sure that we're not falling prey to those strategies.
Virginia, you are president and CEO of the League of Women Voters, and the work that you have had to do is expand a whole lot of the white folks in the League of Women Voters to understand this thing has to be much broader. The reason I'm saying that, look, my parents worked on many campaigns, and historically when you think of League of Women Voters, you are not thinking about black women. And so part of that, and now what we're seeing, and I've been saying this now for a decade, is a lot of young white voters who are now waking up realizing they coming after you too. Texas trying to remove early voting locations from college campuses with 8,000 or more students. We're seeing this happen. And so when we talk about this attack on democracy, attack on voting, we're now seeing there's a direct attack on young white voters and not just African American. Talk about the work that you've done to try to expand the horizons of folks in League of Women Voters to say they coming after us too, and you're nonpartisan.
Thanks, Roland. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, thank you, Melanie. I don't know if she's in the room or not. I just wanted to know, I think today and tomorrow, the dates that Melanie selected were very profound, given the fact that 102 years ago, it's the anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre and the destruction of Black Wall Street. And so for these dates to be chosen to build Black political power, I think are very, very critical. So thank you for that as well, Melanie. I think it was really important. I've been with the League for 5 years. I come out of the Latino and immigrant rights space. When I came to the League, our average demographic was 70-year-old white women. That was our average. And so when I came in, I made a commitment and said, the only way I will do this work is if we center racial equity and center Black liberation in this work, because I believe that the only way that we can move forward together as a country is if we do it together. So I think that was one thing that was important. And so we transformed all of the systems within our organization. We have refused recognition and also removed recognition from some leagues who are not living up to our DEI policy. We've had to do things that were really hard in our organization through systems and policies. I believe that you can't create change unless you're willing to walk the walk and talk the talk, and that means changing systems and organizations from the inside out. So that's really where we focused our time and energy. The other thing I think when it comes to working with Black-led organizations and in the Black community, we're not here to be on top. We have to be on tap and as a resource. And there are a lot of people who aren't willing to follow Black folks' lead, but I think historically, if you just look at history, right, and be honest, we know that Black folks have been the moral compass of this country for a very long time. And so for us to lean in this work, that's why anytime Mel asks me to come, I come, but oftentimes I'm the only one who looks like me who's showing up. And that's okay. I'll be here time and time again because it's also, for me, this is greater than a master's degree. I have the more opportunity to learn and to contribute and to help build towards the country and the promise that America has, right? We know that it has never lived up to. And so that's really how we've tried to transition this organization and really leaning in a different way. We also just recently finalized member rights and responsibilities so that we can remove individual members if we need to, if they're not leaning up. And it's not to become exclusionary, but it's also to be able to say that there are standards and values that there are lots of organizations, and I don't want to say that there aren't a ton of organizations who are historic organizations, who talk a lot about the work but aren't willing to change themselves internally. And it's not easy work. I will be the first one to say that it is not easy work. But at the same time, how can you say that you're standing up for these values, for civil rights, for voting rights, for the things that we want in this country if you're not willing to own the bad history of your organization and to make those changes internally? And so those are the things that we've been focused on.
Trey, 2022 could have been really, really bad for Black folks. And a lot of people say, oh, it was the boots on the ground, it was the organizing, it was the mobilization. But it also were the legal fights that were actually happening. NAACP, LDF, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, Transformative Justice Coalition, on and on and on. Just explain to folks, when we talk about what we're now facing, literally, what is happening in the court system and what y'all are having to contend with on a daily basis.
Sure, and thank you for that question, Roland, and thank you all for having me on the panel. You know, one of the principles that I subscribe to is that politics is the expression of economic interest, right? And many people like to talk about the courts as in the judicial system as like an apolitical system, and the ultimate reality is that what we have seen historically as a trend, particularly in the last decade, but over the course of the last decades, is that the courts have become more and more political. They've become more and more partisan. So that's what LDF is up against right now. We're up against a judicial system that during the civil rights era was key to the strategy of protecting Black people, protecting Black political power, making sure that Black people's lives were not upended, right, and actually judicially killed. Where now we're faced with a court that have created its own doctrine, such as qualified immunity, right, that says that police are allowed to do the type of extrajudicial murders and get away with it with impunity, right? And so that is a piece of what we're up against.
Or in North Carolina court that literally flips to the GOP and reverses a decision the court made just 3 months ago.
Exactly, exactly. So we're contending with people that really do not value our lives. They do not value the lives of Black people, the lives of people of color, the lives of marginalized people inside of this country, right? And so now inside of the courts, we are actively saying that we know that particularly the federal judiciary will not save us, right? It is just a fact. It will not save us. It has become hyper-political, in some cases hyper-partisan. And so the next frontier, one, is for us to be more involved in the appointment process. I tell people all the time that Trump, and I really credit Mitch McConnell for it, the Mitch McConnell strategy was brilliant. He seized the moment and the opportunity to seed the federal bench with people who will not give, excuse my language, a damn
about black people, about people of color, about marginalized people.
And
right?
they purposely were 35 to 45 years old.
Exactly, purposely for generations, as Martin is saying, generations. And so now what we have to contend with is to be more involved inside of these political appointees processes that traditionally we may not have had to think about, at least on the forefront of our minds, to ensure that when issues come back to the courts, because oftentimes they do come right back to the courts, right? It doesn't matter what laws, policies, things that we typically pass, they oftentimes get challenged, whether it's by us, whether it's by our oppositions. They come back to the courts as the final deciding factor, and the courts now are saying that we do not have to have a civil rights background. Many of the appointees do not have to have a civil rights background, a racial justice background. They don't have to care about formerly incarcerated people, right? They don't have to care about young LGBTQ queer folks. And so now we're inside of this position where we're forced to fight on a battleground that is not leveled, right? So how do we get to that piece of having a level battleground on that side? And I'll say just really quickly, last thing that I'll say is that we have found that we have to employ a multitude of strategy, right? The courts and the judicial system is only one piece of the strategy, right? We have to, when we talk about black political power, we have to think about secretaries of states. We have to think about the people who will actually litigate this as our opposition. We have to now take the battle to the state. The states will be the next frontier. We have to think about passing voting rights acts, not on a federal level, but being able to say that each state must have to have a voting rights act so that we can pressure the federal government to enact one that is meaningful, one that has the pre-clearance section inside of it that was gutted by the Shelby decision, one that will say that if you have a history of being racially discriminatory, if you have a history of drawing lines that dilute black political power, you will have to seek approval before you can move forward on enacting any laws. That has to be the next battle for us.
So it's always good when a panelist like segues appropriately to the next person. Billy, you're the immediate past president, National Caucus of Black State Legislators. He just talked about what the next frontier is. We're actually seeing it right now. We're seeing the Supreme Court say that we don't rule on political gerrymandering, and so now we're seeing political gerrymandering run amok on the state level. We're seeing a lot of black state legislators, power just simply being just shrunk left and right. Are those state legislators, are they also saying that they think so much attention is put on Congress, the House and the Senate, that in many ways we're ignoring how critical those state rep and state Senate races are?
You know, I'm so glad that you've segued to this point. You raised this issue. This is an issue that I've also raised with the Biden administration for a while now, in that everything that is important to our existence is trying to be shifted to the states. Women's health care, gun rights, even the ultimate decision as to who wins elections are being decided, and I was on the roll, are being decided by state legislators. And so we must get engaged with that process, and even, you know, who your congressperson is being decided by state legislators. And they are doing this simply because the overwhelming majority of state legislative chambers are being run by conservatives, Republicans. So we need to really get engaged with that process. You know, I used to ask quite a bit of folks, and I'm not going to ask you to do it here. How many of you think that your representative, your state legislator, is doing okay? Or you just hear, you know, he's the kind of legislator that you only hear from during election time?
Ask the question. Do they know their state representative?
I know half of them don't.
No, but ask the question.
How many of you know who your state legislator is? Now we're going to test somebody and ask you. How many of you think that they only show up around election time? Now, you people who are raising your hands, you are telling on yourself. Because the reality is, it's a participatory process. When I ask conservatives, how many of you think your legislator just shows up during election time? You know what they say? My legislator is pretty responsive, meaning that they understand that if they have an issue, they don't sit on the sidelines and wait for that person to come to their church and come around. They contact their legislator and say, this issue is important to me, and you need to address it. There's nothing, no money, no lobbyists, no issue more important to someone who is there because of being elected. There's nothing more important to them, you coming up to them and says, hey, my name is Billy Mitchell. I live in your district. I can vote for you, and this issue is important to me. There's nothing more powerful than that. So that's the kind of mindset that we have to bring to the table so that we can change what's going on in the state legislators. I will tell you, thank God for the people like Helen Butler out there. She's one of those that are out there making sure that folks are voting in our state like they are voting nowhere else. Now, let me tell you, Georgia is a fantastic, and Roland, give me the sign, right? Georgia is a phenomenal place. According to the census, from 2010 to 2020, the last census assessment, 1 million new people moved to Georgia. 90% of them were people of color, most of them black folks. The census suggests that if you are a black person in this country and you are moving to another state, the state you are most likely moving to is Georgia, and it's by far. So we need to continue to cradle, to take that power that we have and make certain that we continue to go and vote as we do, because the state is where really where it's at. There's no question about it. That's where the power is. That's where we can certainly make a difference the quickest as well.
All right, we got about 6 minutes left, so I'm going to do this here, and then I'm going to start on this end. We're going to go all the way down, and that is I want each of you in 30 seconds, let's see how good you are. If there's one thing that you want organizers to do leaving here, what is that one thing? Oh, you don't want to go first? He went, Jesus. Okay.
There's more than one thing. I want you to get engaged in the process no matter what. You know, the best election advice I have ever been given in my life was an older gentleman who said, look at the voting participation process as public transportation. You know, if there's not a bus that is going exactly where you want to go, you take the bus that goes as close to where you want to go. And it's only by doing that over and over and over again where we will get to where we need to be.
Courts, courts, courts. I want us to understand that the issues we're facing right now this summer, we're expecting a not-so-great decision on affirmative action, a not-so-great decision on the Voting Rights Act. I want us to understand that that attack did not start yesterday. It started 40 years ago. They started building power for this moment 40 years ago by pipelining conservative legal talent for the courts. We've got to do the same for civil rights legal talent, and that's why the Young Black Lawyers Organizing Coalition is out here.
Good job. 31 seconds. Yes, I got to stop watching everybody go.
So the one thing I want you to take away is, yes, I want you to make sure you prioritize your issue and vote, but I also want you to participate. And so what I mean by that is we always see across the country poll worker shortages. You can be a part of the process and get paid to do it, and building that pipeline of leadership throughout participating and providing more trust and integrity into our elections by being a part of the process.
Love it. So I just want folks, young people in particular, to remember that we are contending for governing power. That means that while we're engaging inside of the struggle for black freedom and power, we must control the narrative. It is important that you tell your own stories. If you don't, somebody else will tell it for you. We are building the record not just in the courts, but in the court of public opinion as well.
So you actually stole mine about poll worker recruitment, but I will say that the poll worker recruitment piece, everybody needs to be focused on recruiting poll workers. We have seen poll workers and elections officials leave in droves because they are fearful of violence. And so
My parents.
filling that gap is
My parents.
yeah, people who's filling that gaps, Moms for Liberty, who are the main group that has been recruiting individuals on the book bans. They've formed over 200,000 people in the last 2 years, 200,000 white supremacists in the last 2 years who are all white women who have gone. They are filling up the election worker slots as well now. We have to focus on making sure that our folks are at the polls and that they are the ones, because otherwise those are the same people who are going to contest the elections, cast doubt on ballots and everything else. So please recruit poll workers.
And that's how Moms for Liberty took over 10 of the 14 largest school districts in South Carolina and fired a host of black superintendents, including the superintendent of the year, because they showed up at those school board elections. Desmond.
Well, I was thinking long and hard about this, and I just got to be real with y'all. I mean, when you look across the table from me, a lot of familiar faces, people, you know, I mean, I'm not going to talk to y'all about voting. Y'all show up to vote. What I'm going to ask you to do is step outside your comfort zone, right? It's time for us to step outside our comfort zone and bring some fresh blood into this discussion. Right? We got to talk to Shaniqua. We got to talk to Pookie and Ray Ray. And if we don't talk to them, let me tell you something. Somebody else will. And one thing I know is that even though the hardest thing for me as a parent to do is to talk to my kids about sex, I knew I'd rather be the one to talk to them than let the internet teach them about sex. So let's step outside our comfort zone, because that's the only way that I think we're going to reverse the trend.
Yeah, so many things that popped to mind, but what I'll say is I have been given a charge internally with my teams and leaders within SEIU and organizers broadly to think about an intentional Southern organizing and power building strategy, short-term and long-term. There are tremendous opportunities in the South for building power, not only investing in politics, but communities, infrastructure, and thinking about what immediate and longer-term power building in the South looks like. And whatever electoral gains are made in the South, an intense elected official accountability program needs to follow. When they get in, the job begins. It's not over when we get them in like we do every cycle.
What I've been thinking about is what John Witherspoon would say: we need to coordinate. We all have our courts, we are marching in the streets, we have our public communications experts. We have to bring all of these strategies and connect the dots and do the work together.
I'm going to say 3 things. The first one ain't got nothing to do with the question. I'm going to just say 5 words. Keep your eyes on Mississippi. All right, that's all I'm gonna say. Something's going on. Something's going on in Mississippi. Second, to answer the question, what would I say to organizers? A lot of people think that a sign of a good organizer is how well you talk. I've always believed the mark of a great organizer is how well you listen. And so listen to our people, listen to our partners, listen. And the last thing I'm gonna say is this: y'all, this work is hard. We have got to find the space for some black joy in this work. We've got to sustain ourselves, or else we're not going to be able to do this and get to the mountaintop. Black love, black joy. We got to include black culture, because culture will eat strategy for breakfast. And our history shows us that when we do that, when we stand in our faith in black love and black joy and black culture, our history shows us there ain't nothing we can't do.
I will close this out this way. And I was listening to the previous panel when they were talking about all the commitments that have been made after George Floyd's death and how a lot of these companies are falling back on that. We have to do a much better job of utilizing black-owned media. It's very easy to say we're doing these things, but it's called mass media for a reason. What the right has successfully done is they have funded the conservative media infrastructure. I'm not talking even Fox News. I'm talking about their digital operations. I mean, they have completely funded that. And so part of that whole deal is how they're driving that messaging. The reality is, even now, so we launched September 4th, 2018, we still are the only daily black news show in this country. And I can tell you, if it wasn't for our followers, they've contributed. And look, we don't send them swag, we don't send them hats, bumper stickers or whatever. They've contributed $2 million. So I'm talking about $5, $10, that's what they've done. And when we talk about organizations that have actually supported us, Melanie's group, they've been with us from day one. Black Voters Matter have been with us from day one. They've been funding this Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. The key is you have to get messaging out. And so you should be connecting with those black newspapers, black radio, who are those producers, because that's how we're going to reach folks. A lot of times we're waiting on mainstream to show up. They ain't showing up. But I can tell you this, I know this for a fact. There are things that we discuss on our show, and there are people who come on the show who I see later on CNN and MSNBC because their producers are watching. And so we have to utilize our black media infrastructure because that's actually how we got here. So if it wasn't for Chicago Defender, Tri-State Defender, if it wasn't for Pittsburgh Courier, it wasn't for black radio, then you don't even have a civil rights movement. And so we have to absolutely do that. The second thing is this here. All of you organizers, hold up your phones. Hold your phones up. Now, some of y'all, we've taken selfies. Y'all ain't got no clue how to use some of these phones. But I'm about to help y'all out. You are literally holding in your hand a communication device to communicate with the world. When you have events, live stream your events on Facebook, on YouTube. Now let me explain what then happens. When you live stream your events, I can't be every place. We then can grab your live stream, broadcast something on the show because we have the video. You can take that same video, strip the video out, strip the audio off, and now you can send the audio out as well. And so a lot of folks have events, and they are only talking to the people in the room. Use the technology that's at your disposal. And again, people complain about, man, the media didn't show up. You literally can create your own media, and then when that thing is now spread across Twitter, across Facebook and Instagram and fan base on the platforms, we now can expand it. And so I encourage folks to do this all the time. If you're door knocking, live stream that as well, because again, use the technology, because trust me, people are watching, and when they see it, they go, oh, I didn't realize they were doing that. I had a white woman who came on the show with the Poor People's Campaign. And she was one of the organizers. And when she finished, she says, Roland, I got to do one more thing. She said, I didn't know the Poor People's Campaign existed. She said, I'm a white woman in West Virginia. I happened to see your show on YouTube. And I immediately called the Poor People's Campaign in West Virginia, and she's now one of the 3 co-chairs of the state of West Virginia. So a white woman was watching my show in West Virginia, and that's how she got with the Poor People's Campaign. That shows you people are paying attention and watching. Use the media to actually drive your messaging. Give it up for our panel, please. Mel is going to come up and close us out on Black Star Network. We're going to commercial break, and then I'll be live in 2 more minutes. I'll be back on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Melanie, come on up.
All right, Ro. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Was this not power? Yeah. It was, and there was. You had to be the one to do this panel, because we were going to split it up, and it was the way you're able to be the kind of excellent journalist that you are, first and foremost, and to do what you did. So can we give our brother Ro? And anytime, I'm trying to do better. I call you, though. I can call you a drop of a dime. It has to be extremely rare that you won't show up. And that is something we cannot take for granted. And whether I got $1 or got 5, I'm gonna make sure that if we're talking about we're going to put the word out, that we're talking Roland Martin Unfiltered. You have been there, not just us being there. I didn't know a whole lot about the whole digital space in that regard, but it just made sense when you started the network and then even expanding it to what you're doing with Black Star Network. So we have to support Roland Martin Unfiltered, Black Star Network. We have to do that. We've seen too many of our folks go on the, whatever you want to call these networks, and they chew our folks up and spit them out. And then we try to figure out what to do about it. Well, this is what we do about it. This is what we do about it. And thank our panel. I wanted to call, I know we're going to take a group shot when we come, but I want to call up, we're going to shift the agenda. In 3 hours, we had a long day already, right? So what we're going to do is shift some of the things that we were going to do tonight to tomorrow. But we want to bring up our lead facilitator. Part of what we're doing, Roland and everybody, is we're having these power conversations, and then we're going to bring the conversations to the tables where you are. That's why you see the maps. And we tried to have representatives of every southern state that we could, whether we had an affiliate there or not, invited folks who were leaders in their state to come, and we're going to strategize together. And we ask you, those who can come back tomorrow to do that. So Makani Timber, where's Makani Timber, is going to introduce who those lead facilitators are going to be tomorrow, who would then tomorrow be also our panelists. So what you see on the agenda where we're going to be doing power table strategy, and then those leaders will also be the panelists to talk about what came out of it, those solution circles. So Makani, and if you all just stay where you are.
Hey family, how you holding up? Okay, nobody ate their hands yet, right? That's good. So we're going to do this really quick, and actually what I'm going to ask folks to do is if you are a facilitator of a state, just come on up here, come front, if you can. Come on. Don't be shy. I mean, I know none of y'all are shy. None of y'all shy. Y'all looking good. Everybody's dressed nice. Okay. Come on up just real quick. Yeah, that's what I'm going to have them do. So just before we do that right quick, how many people here in the room heard something they're like, they want to do something about it? How many people? Almost everybody? Yep. So these are the people right here. These people right here. These people right here are the ones who are going to help us come together and do it state by state, because what faith without works is dead. We ain't trying to be dead. So I'm going to go ahead, Solandra. Go ahead, and we're just going to pass the mic.
Good afternoon. My name is Solandra Benton, and I'm the Executive Director for the Florida Coalition on Black Civil Participation, and also a board member for the National Coalition.
Okay, but wait a minute. The main thing we want to know is you are facilitating your state, which is?
The one that the real fighters are at, Florida.
Yes.
The real soldiers. We're not running. We're going to stay and fight.
I'm Vincent Sylvan. I'm the convener for Louisiana Unity Coalition, of course, out of New Orleans, but the entire state of Louisiana.
Hi, welcome to Clark Atlanta University. All the alumni in the house, I am one. Woo, CAU. Deborah Scott with Georgia Stand Up and We Vote, We Win, and a state partner of the National Coalition, and we are going to be at the Georgia table.
Good evening. My name is Krista Jones. I'm one of the co-conveners for Black Women's Roundtable Virginia and the NOVA Coalition.
Hello, everyone. I'm Helen Butler, Executive Director of the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda and the convener of the Georgia Black Women's Roundtable. So Georgia is on our mind.
Hello, everyone. Christina Q. I'm happy to be back here with my Ncbcp family, and I'll be facilitating the South Carolina table.
Hello, I'm Letitia Jackson, the convener of the South Alabama Black Women's Roundtable. I'll be convening the Alabama table. I will be facilitating for the Alabama table.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Marcus Bass. I serve as the Executive Director of Advanced North Carolina. I have the pleasure of facilitating the table of North Carolina on tomorrow.
the other half of Alabama, the better half. Hey, hey, hey. Alabama in the house. Sheila Tyson, will be facilitating for the state of Alabama. Oh, I'm a county commissioner for Jefferson County, District 2.
Hi everyone, I am Kaito Welchland. I am the high school ambassador for Mississippi Black Youth Vote.
Hi everyone, I'm Nakila Hemingway and I am the college ambassador of Black Youth Vote in Mississippi.
Hello everyone, I'm Cassandra Welchland, Executive Director of the Mississippi Black Women's Roundtable and facilitating the Mississippi table. And I have one more person that's going to be helping me.
Mississippi in the building. Turn up one time, Mississippi. My name is Amanda Farge, and I'm here on behalf of the Southern Rural Black Women's Initiative for Social and Economic Justice. We serve Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, and we do it the right way.
Melanie told me I can take this personal privilege, Makani, just right quick. All right. Just right quick. One of the ladies on our table from Mississippi just got a call that she received her doctorate of business administration with an emphasis in public administration. Can you help me celebrate Dr. Catherine Elizabeth Robinson? Yeah, give it up for Dr. Robinson.
My girl.
Yeah.
My girl.
Yes.
Come on now,
Okay,
Kat.
passing the mic.
Yay.
Hi, I'm Kara Turrentine, founder and CEO of Turrency Political, and I will be facilitating the Tennessee table. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Yes.
Hi, good evening. I'm Dr. Wes Bellamy, 100 Black Men of America. I'm the former Vice Mayor of Charlottesville, Virginia. I'll be facilitating the Virginia table because we all do whatever Melanie says.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I am Liv Duncan. I am a proud recent graduate of the illustrious Clark Atlanta University. And I am an organizer and communications coordinator for Georgia Stand Up, as well as a Black Youth Vote state coordinator for Georgia. And I will be helping to facilitate the Georgia table.
Thank you. Let's give them all a round. Thank you, family. So what is next is, well, tomorrow we're going to get into these discussions. And tonight, we're going to get into reception. Yeah. Y'all ready? Yeah. All right, let's go. Thank you so much. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. One more announcement. You know there was.
Hi, guys. So this is our reception. Shh. This is the reception to celebrate our opening of the Institute. And also, we have we have books. We have a book signing that will take place with Desmond Meade's book, Let My People Vote. I have read the entire book. Okay, you shame me. I read the entire book. Yes, I did. And powerful stuff. He will be signing those books. I don't think we have enough for everybody, but the first whoever gets there signs them. But Desmond, it is a powerful, powerful story. There were so many layers to the story. And of course, you had Black Women's Roundtable in there, so we were excited about that, Solange. But he will be signing those books, and it's as a token of our appreciation for you all being here. All right, see you. And Getcho Caldwell, our founding director, is somewhere. And can you all give our National Coalition team and the CAU family a round of thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so we will. Where's Getcho? Okay, come on down here, Getcho. So tell us where we're going, because the food's not up here. Okay. Getcho Caldwell II.
Hi, it's nice to see everybody. We do have a wonderful reception plan. You're going to experience a beautiful African-American sister who is a jazz acoustical expert. And when you hear her music, you need to invite her to your hometown to participate. But join us down on the first level, level number 1. And we're in the cafeteria, but we're in the back part where we set up for the reception, and we would love to see you there. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. All right.